Meera Reed woke before first light. The wet dawn air clung to her cheeks, and the swamp seemed more silent than usual. Only the distant trill of marsh birds and the gentle sloshing murmur of water around the reeds disturbed the hush. She had slept with her spear at her side as she always did now, and upon waking, her first act was to test its balance. Her father, Lord Howland Reed, had taught her to keep weapons well maintained, even in the relative safety of Greywater Watch. The spear was an extension of her arm, the net a reflection of her cunning, and the bow a partner to her keen eye. Even though Greywater Watch itself was said to move, shifting among the bogs and the watery labyrinth of the Neck, Meera knew she could never be complacent. She could never truly rest, not now, when so much in the realm had been turned upside down, and all the old certainties had been replaced by the hollow emptiness that followed war. She rose to her feet and peered out at the moss-covered trees that swayed gently in a breeze coming from the north. The dawnlight revealed watery channels choked with lilies, patches of soft, quivering ground, and the twisting ancient trunks that formed the labyrinth her people called home. The Neck had always been haunted by stories of ghosts and whispered legends about the children of the forest. Under the half-light, Meera could believe in such things more easily than ever. She took a breath and tasted the brine in the air. The Neck belonged to them, the Crannogmen who knew its tides and currents, its hidden pathways, and the secrets that the tall knights from the south dismissed as superstitions. She heard the flutter of leaves behind her and turned to see her father. Howland Reed was slight of build, hardly the image of a typical lord, yet in his eyes lay depths that dwarfed the illusions of grandeur worn by men thrice his size. There was a gentleness in those eyes too, a reflective intelligence. He nodded at her, and she inclined her head in respectful greeting. For years, she had ventured beyond Greywater Watch, beyond the Neck, traveling north to the Wall, and even beyond it with Bran Stark. She had witnessed wonders that haunted her dreams. But it was here, in the wetlands of her birth, that she felt most powerfully herself. "How did you sleep?" asked her father in a soft tone. Meera ran a hand across the smooth, dark grain of her spear's haft. "Lightly," she replied. "I dreamed of ice and ravens again." Howland looked away for a moment. "Those dreams will linger a while." He paused as if weighing something on his mind. "We have decisions to make, my daughter. The world is changing in ways even I could not have foretold. I have had letters from the north, from Winterfell." "No," popped. A tremor of memory fluttered across Meera's mind. The snows, the swirling white, the journey with Bran, Jojen's sacrifice in that stark, winter-locked forest. All of it lived behind her eyelids. "What do they say?" Howland exhaled slowly. "Lord Stark. Some name him king in the north still, though matters of kingship are uncertain. He knows your role in protecting his brother. The new generation of Starks, the shape of their rule. There is talk that the power in the south is shifting. King's Landing is not what it was, and the Iron Throne is in question. The Crannogmen have always chosen to remain hidden and safe in our bogs. Yet the call has come again. Alliances are shifting, and opportunities abound. There is a chance for the Neck to have a louder voice. We remain a small house among great ones, but perhaps no longer." "No." He paused, letting the words sink in. Meera looked at him, her heart skipping a beat. She knew well that her father was an unsung hero in the rebellion against the Mad King all those years ago, an essential ally to Eddard Stark. The Reeds were faithful, reticent, and cunning. They had never sought open power, nor the responsibilities that came with it. But so much had changed since the wars that ravaged the Seven Kingdoms. If there was an opening for the Crannogmen to assert themselves, to earn a seat at the table of the great lords, would that not help protect their land and their people? She recalled how Jojen had often said the future was a mystery revealed only in glimpses. She thought of him with both love and sadness. "We are who we are, father," she said carefully. "We have never yearned for high towers or the weight of crowns." Howland gave a rueful smile. "We have not, it's true, but the world is moving fast. The White Walkers are gone, though the scars remain. The Targaryens are ghosts and flames. The Baratheons are naught but scattered embers. House Lannister has receded in power. Winterfell is rebuilding, and the North needs strong allies. The question is, do we remain as we always have, or do we speak up for ourselves and stake a claim that might cement our influence. Meera tapped the butt of her spear against the soft ground, unsure. Our people are not the knights of the Vale or the fierce Northmen with their great swords. We hunt with nets and spears in the bogs. We move silently, step lightly. These southern folk might never see us as equals. But there is something you must consider, Howland said, stepping closer. We have knowledge they do not. We are cunning in ways they cannot grasp. And we have proven more than once that it is not the size of a man that makes him mighty. This is not just about pride. It is about securing the future of the Neck and the future of House Reed. There are those who whisper that the Crannogmen should be a great house in their own right, the guardians of the Northern Gateway. It is not such a foolish notion. Nilwini. A flicker of fire ignited in Meera's chest. She recalled the many times she had proven herself, scaling the monstrous heights of the wall, venturing into the dread beyond. She recalled how even lords and knights of grand houses had yielded to her skill and determination. She was only a Crannogman's daughter, but she had witnessed powers older than the Seven Kingdoms themselves. Who would lead this? You, she asked, though she already suspected the answer. Howland shook his head slowly. My days of adventure, if I ever had them, are long past. I am no less devoted to our cause, but I do not have the spirit or the renown that might draw men and women to our side. But you, Meera, you have traveled with us Stark, ventured beyond the wall. You are known to wildlings and Northmen alike. You have proven your skill in combat and in council. A quiet rumor travels the land that the daughter of Howland Reed is a figure worth respecting, worth hearing. If anyone can spearhead this effort for our people, it is you. Nas. Meera's breath caught. She looked down at the scuffed leather of her boots, feeling the soft give of the ground beneath them. Me? A figure worth hearing? All I did was help Bran. All, Howland said wryly, was risk your life in an impossible journey to ensure that a boy with strange gifts reached his destiny. A boy upon whose shoulders the fate of the North rested. You have the trust of the Starks, or at least a measure of it. You have proven yourself. If we are to lay claim to a seat among the great houses, who better to represent us? No. The idea swirled around her mind like mist off the marsh. House Reed had always been overshadowed by the Lords of Winterfell, yet they were no mere banner house. They were guardians of the Neck, keepers of arcane knowledge, adept in stealth and amphibious warfare. It was a strange concept for them to try to stand among the proud lords of Westeros, but the times were strange. Let me think on this, Meera said quietly, her voice barely cutting through the morning's hush. Howland reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder. We do not rush. The Neck has waited generations to be properly respected. Another few moons will not break us, but we must not wait too long. Windows of opportunity close swiftly in this realm. He left her then to her thoughts, and she listened to the quiet drip of water from the moss-laden branches overhead. So many memories filled her mind. Bran's face at the moment he awakened to his gifts, Jojen's unwavering faith, the bitter cold that seemed to claw at their souls beyond the wall. She had seen the stoic might of Jon Snow, the forging of alliances that once seemed impossible. She knew the realm's fragile peace could fracture in an instant if old loyalties and new ambitions collided. Perhaps she could help ensure that didn't happen, at least for her people. That day, she went out into the marshes with only her spear and a small net, as she used to when she was younger, before Jojen's visions led them away. She waded through shallow pools, silently trailing game. When she found a plump, startled frog near the water's edge, she cast her net with unerring accuracy. It was a small, trivial hunt, but it reminded her of who she was and where she came from. The simple satisfaction of living with the land and mastering its resources steadied her. As she returned to Greywater Watch, the watchtowers emerged from the haze, and the patchwork of causeways and half-sunken walkways guided her home. She passed a few guards, no more than a handful of Crannogmen armed with spears and short bows. They greeted her with friendly nods. Here, she was not special or different, merely Meera Reed, a child of the marsh. But the idea of stepping onto the larger stage of Westeros once more spurred a new sense of purpose within her. Perhaps it was destiny. She found her father in the lower hall, studying a table carved with the topography of the Neck. Tiny wooden markers indicated watch points and potential threats. He looked up when she entered. "Daughter," he said simply. Her voice was resolute. "If we do this, I will lead. but I must have your counsel. I am no lady seeking fancy dresses and courtesies. I am a hunter, a fighter. The lords and ladies of Westeros might sneer at that." Howland nodded. "They might, and that is our advantage." Thus began weeks of preparation. Meera spent hours with her father, discussing the intricacies of each great house, the alliances formed during the recent wars, the betrayals and oaths. She learned which lords might be sympathetic to the Reeds, which might scoff, and which would watch with cautious interest. Letters were dispatched in careful language, testing the waters, feeling out the possibilities. To seek recognition as a great house was no small matter. Each of the 7 kingdoms had its proud, ancient lines. But the times were changing, and House Reed had secrets of its own, trump cards hidden in the bogs. Meera also spoke with the people of the Neck. She visited the small hamlets scattered among the swamps, places where families lived off fish and frogs, weaving nets by flickering lantern light. She listened to their concerns, the difficulty of trade with the outside world, the scorn they often received from traveling merchants, the sense of isolation. Many were proud to be Crannogmen, quick to defend their traditions, but behind that pride lurked the knowledge that they were vulnerable if trouble ever swept the Neck. "If we stand alone, we might be swallowed up by the tide of war," one old woman told Meera. "You have seen what happened in the south, the Dragon Queen and her armies. We are small folk. We could be drowned in the chaos." Meera realized, then, that forging a stronger position was not just about pride. It was about protecting those who had no real defense if a grand army decided to march north again. The Neck was a natural barrier, yes, and the Crannogmen were fierce in their element. But the unstoppable devastation she had seen beyond the wall taught her that no place was truly safe. No place was truly safe. The world was unpredictable, and so it was wise to be prepared. One evening, a response came from Winterfell. Meera stood by her father's side as he read the letter by lantern light. A faint smile lit Howland's face. "Lord Stark, Bran Stark, invites us to Winterfell. He wants to discuss the future of the North and its guardians." Meera's heart quickened. Bran Stark was no ordinary lord. He was something more, something she did not fully understand, but she trusted him. The letter was an open door. "We should go," she said. "He must know what we are planning, or at least he must have foreseen some of it." Howland rubbed his temple. "I do not doubt it. He has become otherworldly in many ways. If he extends this invitation, it is because he sees value in what we have to offer." Greywater Watch was not a place easily left behind, but arrangements were made. A small retinue would travel with Meera, carrying the banner of House Reed, a black lizard lion on a gray-green field, the emblem of the Neck. They would travel north along the swamp's secret paths until they reached higher ground. There, the journey would continue on horseback. Meera had never been fond of horses, preferring a boat or her own sure steps through the muck, but she recognized the necessity. When the day came for their departure, the sky was a dull pewter, threatening rain. She wore a boiled leather jerkin, dyed in subtle greens and browns, and a cloak of the same hues. Her spear was slung across her back. On her belt hung a small net folded neatly. She bid her father farewell. He would remain behind to guard the seat of their power, to manipulate the floating castle as needed to keep it hidden. The Crannogmen who accompanied her were a mix of scouts and guards, chosen for their skill and loyalty. Crossing the Neck was a journey Meera knew by heart. When the marshes gave way to drier roads, she felt a pang of both relief and loss. Relief, because the threat of bog devils and sinkholes was gone. Loss, because she was leaving the only home she had truly known. The causeway that led north stretched before them. Along the way she saw crumbling towers, remnants of old wars, ghosts of ancient armies that had attempted to cross the Neck, and met the cunning of the Crannogmen. They took shelter in a small village one night, where Northmen recognized the banners of House Reed. The villagers greeted Meera and her retinue with cautious curiosity. Crannogmen seldom traveled in the open. A gaggle of children followed them, whispering, "Look at their clothes," or, "They say Crannogmen ride lizard lions." The old tales had a life of their own. Meera smiled politely and tried not to think about the weight of what she was attempting to do. As they neared Winterfell, the vastness of the north reminded her just how grand the Stark domain was. Even with the scars of war, The rolling hills and thick forests seemed to sprawl endlessly. Smoke rose from Winterfell's chimneys as they approached, and Meera spotted the banners on the walls, the direwolf of House Stark flapping in the wind. The castle gates opened to receive them, and a steward guided them into the courtyard. Servants came forth to tend the horses, while Meera dismounted and stretched her limbs. Inside, the changes were obvious. Reconstruction was ongoing after the castle's partial destruction during the wars. Stone walls had fresh mortar. New timbers replaced old ones scorched by flames. Yet there remained a solemn, enduring spirit about Winterfell, something that transcended the events that had battered it. A small group greeted them, young men and women in Stark livery, along with a few older retainers. Near the front of the group was a tall, lean young lord with auburn hair. It took Meera a moment to realize it was Rickon Stark, grown into a man since the last time she had laid eyes on him. Beside him, calmer, quieter, sat Bran Stark in a wheeled chair carved from dark wood. He wore simple yet dignified clothing, and his pale eyes seemed far older than his years. Meera went forward and knelt briefly, not out of subservience, but as a show of respect to the Lord of Winterfell. Bran inclined his head. "Meera," he said, voice like the hush of wind through ancient trees. "It's good to see you. Rise." She rose, noticing how Rickon examined her. She remembered the small boy from so long ago, fierce and wild, who had once run about with shaggy hair. Now he stood with the proud bearing of a Stark, his face more wolfish, eyes keen. "We are honored by your presence," Rickon said formally, though a slight smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Bran gestured for them to be led inside. The great hall had been repaired, though it bore the traces of new construction. Long tables stretched across the stone floor, a massive hearth crackling with warmth at one end. A high seat draped with direwolf pelts remained in a place of honor. Meera's retinue was guided to seats along one of the tables, while she was invited to join Bran and Rickon closer to the hearth. She took her place, and a cup of hot cider was placed before her. Bran studied her. "You've come far, Meera. You and I have shared a journey once, though that feels like another lifetime. I see the ghosts of that time in your eyes." She nodded. "My father and I believe the Neck has remained silent for too long. We came to see if we could speak plainly about the future. We have ambitions we never had before." Rickon lifted a brow. "Ambitions?" Bran's gaze never left Meera. "The Crannogmen seek to be recognized as a great house, with all the rights and powers that entails," he stated, as if he were reading the words from her mind. There was a murmur among those standing nearby. Meera's cheeks flushed, though she kept her composure. She had forgotten how direct Bran could be, especially now, with his strange gifts. "Yes," she said. "We mean no disrespect to House Stark, nor do we seek to usurp any authority. But the Neck guards the pathway into the north, and for generations, House Reed has served with loyalty and cunning. The times are changing. My father believes, and I agree, that we should stand as guardians not only in name, but in recognized authority." Rickon turned to his brother. "Can that even be done?" The other lords might have objections. Bran's pale eyes flickered. "Many things once deemed impossible have come to pass. The Night King was destroyed, the dragons returned, and a Targaryen queen nearly claimed the throne before vanishing across the sea once more. The realm has been shattered and remade. Why not House Reed? No." Meera felt a small surge of hope. "We would not stand alone. The Reeds have always stood with the Starks. Our loyalty is unbroken, from the days of King Rickard Stark to Eddard Stark, and now to you. But if we are recognized as a great house, we gain a voice in the councils of the realm, a vote in decisions that shape all the kingdoms. We can better protect the Neck, and by extension the North, if we are treated as equals among the highest lords. We have resources hidden in the marshes, knowledge that can benefit the realm. But we need a seat at the table." No. Rickon shrugged. "I see the logic. Others may not. The lords of the Vale, the Riverlands, they're set in their ways." Bran's gaze was distant, as though he were seeing beyond the walls. "True, but we must decide if it is something we want to foster. Do we, as the Starks of Winterfell, support House Reed's ascension?" A long silence stretched. Meera's heart pounded. Finally, Bran turned his head to look her in the eye. Yes, he said simply. I believe we should. House Reed has saved our family more than once. Your father saved mine, in the Tower of Joy. You saved me beyond the wall. It is time the realm recognizes the importance of the Crannogmen. Noon. Meera breathed out, relieved. Rickon nodded, though he wore a guarded expression. Our support might not be enough alone, but it's a start. We have allies who might lend their voice. The Manderleys, for one. Perhaps the Glovers, though they have been less certain lately. Thank you, Meera said, her voice soft. We do not intend to strong-arm or bribe our way into power, but we must at least try. They spoke long into the night, discussing tactics, forging letters, and planning. Bran advised that Meera travel to White Harbor next, to speak with Wyman Manderley, a cunning lord who understood the value of alliances. Meanwhile, Rickon would begin to spread word that the Neck and its people played a vital role in the security of the North. If they could secure enough northern support, the next step would be to reach out to the rest of the realm. Meera stayed in Winterfell for a few days, reuniting with old faces, meeting new ones, and sharing tidbits of her stories. Some nights, she would walk the ramparts and remember the old Godswood where the weirwood tree once whispered to them. She found time to visit that Godswood, knelt beneath the carved face of the weirwood, and let the memories wash over her. She felt Bran's presence as if he were a part of the roots. The Godswood felt alive with the hush of centuries. On the morning she departed for White Harbor, Bran met her in the courtyard. Snow drifted lazily from slate-gray skies, dusting the stones. He handed her a small pouch. For your journey, he said cryptically. She opened it and found a carved piece of weirwood in the shape of a slender lily pad, a symbol of the Crannogmen. She felt a warmth spread through her chest. Thank you, she said. May it guide you, or remind you of why you are doing this, Bran murmured. Then he touched her arm gently. The path ahead is fraught with challenges, but you already know that. Stay true to yourself, and to your people. With that parting blessing, Meera and her retinue rode south along the King's Road, bound for White Harbor. The Neck was behind them, and the wide world stretched out before them once more. When they arrived in White Harbor, the bustling port city greeted them with the smells of salt and fish, mingled with the aroma of hot pies. Snow had turned to a light drizzle here near the coast. The Manderley banner, white merman on a blue-green field, flew from the walls. This was the North's primary link to the outside world, boasting a harbor filled with ships from the free cities, the Vale, even some from the far south. Meera led her small group through the gates, noticing that the guards, tall, broad-shouldered Northmen, studied them with curiosity. Crannogmen were still a rare sight in such places. Within the walls, the city was alive with market stalls and workshops. Stone houses rose in tiers, and at the center stood the new castle, a shining monument to the Manderley power. Winding streets led them to the courtyard where they dismounted. A steward approached, accompanied by a short, stout man with a bristling mustache. Welcome to White Harbor, he greeted. Lord Wyman Manderley is expecting you. Meera followed him through corridors adorned with colorful hangings depicting scenes of ships, sea creatures, and proud Manderley ancestors. They entered a spacious hall where the Lord himself awaited. Wyman Manderley was large, his girth a testament to his love of good food and comfort, yet his eyes were sharp beneath bushy brows. At his side stood his heir, a more slender, but equally resolute man, who regarded the newcomers with mild curiosity. Meera Reed, Lord Wyman said in a booming voice. Daughter of Howland Reed, who once aided my dear friend Ned Stark in the war. Come, you must be hungry after your travels. They were led to a long table brimming with platters of fish, roasted fowl, bread bowls filled with thick chowders. Steam drifted upward, carrying tantalizing scents. Meera and her retinue sat, though they ate sparingly, mindful of courtesy. Lord Wyman, however, devoured his meal with gusto, asking questions between mouthfuls. So, young lady, he began, wiping grease from his lips, I hear the Crannogmen desire a seat among the great houses. Is that rumor true? She met his gaze steadily. We do. Times have changed, my lord. We believe our role in guarding the North should be recognized. Ha! Wyman exclaimed. I've always said the Reeds were more important than they let on. I recall stories of your father from the war. Clever man, that one. And from what I hear, you're none too shy about venturing into danger yourself. I've had my share of journeys, Meera said quietly. And in the course of those journeys, I've learned the realm is fragile. We all must do our part to ensure its stability. Lord Wyman nodded, chewing thoughtfully. Indeed, you have the support of the Starks, I assume. They've given their blessing, Meera replied. Wyman leaned back in his chair, patting his stomach. Well, I'll not oppose you. In fact, White Harbor has long recognized the strategic importance of the Neck. If you stand as a great house, perhaps we can do more trade along the waterways, push commerce into the deeper swamps. We might see ships navigating even the smaller tributaries with your guidance, of course. Meera suppressed a smile. She knew Manderley's love of trade and wealth. If she could offer him a commercial advantage, he would be a strong ally indeed. That can be arranged, she said. We know the channels better than anyone. Wyman's heir gave a pointed look to his father. We must also consider the rest of Westeros, father. Supporting House Reed might draw the attention of others who see it as a disruption of the old order. Wyman waved a dismissive hand. Bah. The old order has been battered to pieces. The Targaryens, Baratheons, Lannisters, all of them are shadows of their former selves. The North stands strong, and we do what is best for the North, yes? He eyed Meera. You'll have our word of support in any assembly or council that discusses the matter. I'm sure the Glovers will back you once they see sense. The Umbers might be a bit more difficult, but I suspect they'll follow the Starks' lead if it comes to it. Relief spread through Meera. That was one more important ally secured. She thanked Lord Wyman graciously, and they continued to talk about trade routes, river navigation, and new settlements that might spring up if the Neck became safer for commerce. After a night spent in comfortable guest quarters, Meera and her party departed, bearing letters of support from White Harbor. Their next destination was Moat Cailin, a ruined fortress once used to guard the causeway leading into the north. If the Crannogmen had a claim to greatness, it might well be tested here, for Moat Cailin was known as a strategic choke point, vital in times of invasion. When they arrived, the fortress looked much the same as it always had. Crumbling towers, moss-covered stones, waterlogged trenches. A small garrison of Northmen held it, but they seemed bored and under-resourced, as if no one truly believed an attack would come. Meera gazed upon the ancient ruin with new eyes, imagining what it could be if the Neck had the funds and recognition to rebuild. Moat Cailin could become a formidable outpost again, a bastion of security under House Reed's aegis. She spent a day talking with the garrison's captain, who lamented their lack of manpower and supplies. We hold, but that's about all we can do. If an enemy came in strength, Moat Cailin wouldn't last long, he said, spitting onto the damp ground. That solidified Meera's resolve. The Neck had to be fortified. The North could not be truly safe if the causeway was left to rot. She felt a swirl of pride and responsibility. Perhaps she could be the one to make this happen, to secure an ancient gateway in a way it hadn't been secured in centuries. That evening, under the gray twilight, Meera stood on the broken ramparts. She closed her eyes and let her mind wander. She envisioned a renewed Moat Cailin, manned by Crannogmen who knew every reed and rivulet. She saw tall banners snapping in the wind, House Reed's black lizard lion beside the direwolf of Stark. She felt a strange sense of destiny, as though Jojen's voice whispered encouragement from beyond the veil. Her mind filled with memories of the White Walkers, the unearthly shriek of whites, and the swirling snow. She remembered the terror of an unstoppable force. Though that threat was gone, others would arise in time. The world was vast and precarious. If she could secure the Neck, she would do it for all who called the North home. Days later, word reached her that a grand assembly was being called in River Run. Many lords of the Trident and the North would gather to discuss new borders, trade deals, and the shape of the post-war realm. It was rumored that representatives from the Vale, the Iron Islands, and even the Stormlands might attend. This would be Meera's chance to press her case to a wide audience. The notion of speaking before so many powerful nobles filled her with a mixture of fear and resolve. She sent ravens to her father, to the Starks, to the Manderleys, urging them to converge at River Run. Then, with her small retinue, she set out once more, heading south past Moat Cailin. The lands gradually turned greener, the air warmer. She recalled how different the South felt to her, the swirling currents of politics that had destroyed families and brought down dynasties. She was stepping into that swirl now. The journey took them through the fringes of the riverlands past farmland that had been ravaged by war and was only beginning to recover. They found occasional hostility among villagers who eyed armed strangers warily. But the banners of House Reed, alongside the stark sigil carried by a few of her men, usually earned them wary acceptance. River Run itself rose by the confluence of the Red Fork and the Tumblestone, its walls strong and its gates guarded. Meera's retinue made camp outside initially, as the castle was hosting dozens of lords, ladies, knights, and their entourages. Tents of all colors sprouted like a field of strange flowers along the riverbanks. The air buzzed with talk of alliances and bargains. They were soon summoned inside the castle halls, where Lord Edmure Tully, the nominal lord of River Run, greeted them politely. He had grown older and perhaps wearier since the day she'd heard about, but he still carried himself with a certain dignity. "So you are Meera Reed," he said, looking her over. "We have heard of your exploits. It's a pleasure to meet you." She inclined her head. "My Lord Tully, I thank you for hosting this assembly." He waved a hand. "The credit goes to the lords who demanded a centralized location to settle so many disputes. We're overrun with petty quarrels and ambitions. Let us hope your cause is simpler." Ninatuinas. Meera thought it ironic. Her cause might be simpler in statement, but not necessarily in acceptance. The next few days were a blur of introductions, hushed corridor meetings and feasts. At a grand banquet, Meera observed representatives from across the realms. From the Vale came Lord Royce and a few younger knights. From the Iron Islands, a man calling himself Lord Commander Greyjoy, though she was unsure if that was official. There were lords from the Riverlands as well, including those who had once sworn to House Tully but now bickered among themselves. The Stormlands were represented by a minor lord as a steward, for the main line had dwindled. The Westerlands had fewer attendees, as House Lannister had diminished significantly after the war, yet a distant cousin of the Lion family was present. The Reach boasted a handful of ambitious new lords who had taken advantage of the Tyrell's downfall. Into this cauldron stepped Meera Reed, unassuming in appearance, but carrying the weight of her people's aspirations. When the assembly began in earnest, held in River Run's great hall, the lords and ladies took seats in a broad circle. A dais was set for Lord Edmure Tully, who oversaw the discussions. Meera and her northern allies sat together, representatives of House Stark, Manderley, and a few others. After a day spent discussing trade routes, the settlement of war damages, and the problem of banditry in the Riverlands, Meera's turn came. Edmure Tully looked to her with mild curiosity. "Now, Lady Meera Reed, you requested time to speak on a matter of importance regarding the neck." She stood, heart thumping. She gazed around at the gathering, dozens of expectant faces, some weary, some skeptical, some openly bored. She cleared her throat. "My lords and ladies," she began, voice echoing softly in the cavernous hall. "I stand before you as a representative of House Reed, guardians of the neck, loyal bannermen to House Stark for many generations. We are a small people, used to living in the swamps and marshes that many of you have never seen. We know secrets of those waters that none can match. We have stood by our allies in times of war and proven our worth on more than one occasion." She paused, gathering her courage. "Today, I speak for the Crannogmen who live in the neck, those who have suffered as the wars swept past us, who remain vulnerable in the face of future conflicts. My father, Lord Howland Reed, has authorized me to seek a formal recognition of House Reed as a great house. We wish to stand as a pillar of defense and stability, not just for the North, but for all the realms that must one day pass through the neck to reach the far North. Too often, we have seen armies march without hindrance, bringing destruction in their wake. The neck can be your shield, if you allow us the resources and the standing to fortify it properly." "Nay." A murmur rippled through the assembly. Some looked intrigued, others exchanged doubtful glances. Meera pressed on. "We have the support of House Stark, whose trust we have earned. House Manderley has pledged to back our cause, recognizing the trade benefits that would arise if the neck were made safer. We do not seek to supplant the authority of any existing house, but to claim what we believe is our rightful place. A seat among the great houses, ensuring that no one will dismiss the neck as a backwater to be trampled." Nidyasenil. A moment of silence followed, broken by a tall, lanky lord from the reach who rose, regarding her through half-lidded eyes. "Ambitious talk," he said, voice laced with condescension. "House Reed is scarcely known outside the north. Why should we entrust you with such responsibility?" Meera set her jaw. "Because we have always fulfilled our responsibilities. My father aided Eddard Stark in the rebellion that unseated the Mad King. I aided Brandon Stark, whose actions helped save the realm from the terror beyond the wall. We Crannogmen do not claim glory often, but we have done our part. Now we seek only the recognition and means to continue protecting the realm. Another voice chimed in, a lady from the Vale, eyebrows arched. "This realm has had enough of war. Why stir the pot by creating new great houses?" Meera spread her hands in a gesture of calm. "Precisely because we have had enough of war. Strengthening the neck means preventing future wars from spilling into the north, and vice versa. It means stability. We stand at a crossroads. Why not secure it?" Lord Edmure Tully cleared his throat, bringing attention back to him. "House Stark, do you stand by House Reed's request?" A Stark representative rose, a cousin of the main line, since neither Bran nor Rickon was present. "We do. Bran Stark and Rickon Stark fully endorse House Reed's ascension. Their role in defending the North and aiding our house is paramount." Wyman Manderley rumbled his agreement, and a few other northern lords nodded. But the rest of the assembly looked uncertain. The conversation spiraled into questions about precedent, about whether other lesser houses might also clamor for recognition, about who would pay for fortifying the neck, and about trade routes. Meera did her best to counter each point, citing alliances, pragmatic benefits, and the unique position of House Reed. She felt her patience wearing thin. The subtle arrogance of some southern lords rankled her. Yet she held her composure, remembering her father's lessons about courtesy and cunning. When she sensed that the debate was teetering on the brink of dismissal, she played her final card. "My lords and ladies," she said, cutting through the chatter, "this is not merely about titles. The Crannogmen know secrets of the land, healing herbs, hidden waterways, vantage points that could protect any force traveling north or south. If recognized, House Reed will share these with the realm for the good of all. Additionally, we have methods of warfare that can be taught to your troops, skirmishing in wetlands, guerrilla tactics that can save lives. Why not harness this knowledge? Why not give the neck a voice, rather than let it remain a vulnerable, neglected march?" Some heads nodded in reluctant acceptance. Lord Edmure Tully raised his hands. "We will take this request under advisement and vote on it at the conclusion of our assembly." With that, the formal hearing ended, leaving Meera to navigate the labyrinth of backroom negotiations that followed. Over the next several days, she met with lords and ladies in side chambers, corridors, and private feasts, forging alliances and addressing concerns. She promised the Vale a safe route for their trade caravans if the mountain passes ever froze. She offered the Riverlords a chance to expand fishing territory into the deeper marsh channels. She even approached the Iron Islands delegate with talk of maritime knowledge gleaned from the bogs. Exhausted, she retired to her tent each night, mind spinning with possibilities. She ached for the simple comfort of Greywater Watch. But she pressed on. She had to. The Crannogmen were depending on her to secure something that had never been considered before, a seat among the great houses. At last, the final day of the assembly arrived. In the great hall, Edmure Tully read out a series of agreements on trade and borders. Then came the motion regarding House Reed. Lords and ladies were invited to cast their votes. One by one, they stood, voicing their approval or disapproval. It was tense, each endorsement or rejection hitting Meera's heart like a hammer blow. The Starks, Manderleys, Serwins, and many lesser northern lords spoke in favor. Some Riverlords were lukewarm, but swayed by Edmure Tully's neutrality. The Vale was split, but the key lords seemed to lean toward acceptance due to the promises Meera had made. The Westerlands lords, what few there were, remained skeptical, as did a handful from the Reach. The Stormlands representative abstained, citing the fractious state of their own domain. Finally, the tally was in. Meera's breath caught as Edmure Tully recited the result. By a slim but undeniable margin, the Assembly recognized House Reed as a new great house, with the right to fortify the neck and hold a seat in any Grand Council convened in the future. An undercurrent of murmuring filled the hall. History was being made, and not all approved. But the formal vote had passed. Meera bowed her head, a mix of triumph and disbelief flooding her senses. She heard Wyman Manderley bellowing congratulations, saw a few nods of respect from other lords, and felt the weight of 100 eyes upon her. The condescension of some still lingered in the air, but they were now forced by the Assembly's decision to regard her as an equal. She swallowed the lump in her throat. This was real. House Reed, a great house of Westeros. In the aftermath, some lords came to congratulate her directly, hoping to secure favorable deals. She navigated their flattery with care. Outside the hall, she found a quiet corridor and leaned against a cool stone wall, letting the reality sink in. She clutched at the weirwood carving Bran had given her and felt an unbidden tear trail down her cheek. Jojen's words echoed in her memory. "You are part of the world's song, Meera. Sing your part." She had, and here she stood. That night, a modest celebration was held among her retinue and a few friendly lords. They toasted House Reed, the neck, and the bright new future. Meera accepted their praises with humility, reminding them that the real work was just beginning. They would need to rebuild Moat Cailin, strengthen alliances, and ensure the neck became the bulwark it was meant to be. After Riverrun's assembly concluded, Meera traveled north again, letters of recognition in hand, along with a new sense of purpose. She visited Moat Cailin once more, speaking with builders about the restoration. She dispatched scouts to chart the deeper swamp routes. Her retinue grew as volunteers from various parts of the north joined, curious about this rising house. When she finally reached Greywater Watch, her father stood on a small jetty, waiting. The floating fortress was half shrouded in mist, its wooden walkways creaking softly as the castle shifted. He approached as she dismounted from a flat-bottomed boat, and she held out the letters sealed with the sigils of numerous lords. "We did it, father," she whispered, voice trembling with excitement. "They recognized us as a great house." Howland's eyes gleamed. "I knew you could." He led her inside, where they spoke for hours by the hearth. Meera recounted the assembly, the debates, the final vote. Howland listened intently, hands folded on his lap, nodding at the crucial moments. When she finished, he took a deep breath. "We have a great duty now. The neck will look to us as protectors and leaders in a new sense. We must honor that." "Daitol." Meera smiled, thinking of the silent swamps, the hidden channels, and the proud, independent Crannogmen. "We will. The neck has always been our home, now is also our responsibility, in a way it never was before." In the weeks and months that followed, the transformation began. Workers arrived to Moat Cailin, hauling logs and stone. Crannogmen guided them through the bogs, teaching them how to lay foundations on spongy ground. Drawbridges were constructed, watchtowers repaired. Trained ravens began carrying messages to and from Greywater Watch more frequently. It became a lively network of trade routes, secret passages, and new alliances. Meera found herself more involved in the intricacies of governance than she ever expected. She oversaw the organization of a small but skilled standing force, Crannog warriors adept with spears, nets, and short bows. Their mission was clear: to defend the neck against any threat. Lord Stark, ever watchful in Winterfell, offered assistance in arms and provisions, and Wyman Manderley established a small trading outpost within the marshes, forging deeper economic ties. As the months turned to a year, the rumor that House Reed was strengthening the neck spread across the realm. Merchants cautiously ventured northward, lured by the possibility of safe passage. Knights from the south scoffed at the idea of bowing to a bog lord, but some adventurous ones visited to test the Crannogmen's skill in friendly contests of archery and spear throwing. More often than not, they left impressed. One autumn day, Meera stood atop the rebuilt walls of Moat Cailin, gazing out across the causeway. The land stretched to the horizon, shimmering in the slanted light. In the distance, she saw the faint shapes of merchant wagons heading toward the north. Further back, she saw the watery glisten of the marshes that led to Greywater Watch. A breeze carried the scent of mud and water lilies, a scent she associated with safety and home. She closed her eyes and remembered. She remembered the journey with Bran, the heartbreak of losing Jojen, the distant howls of deerwolves, the swirl of wind and snow. She recalled the uncertain nights in that cave, the terror of the whites. Then she pictured the day in Riverrun's great hall, the hush as the lords cast their votes. Her life had been a tapestry of quiet bravery and unwavering loyalty. Now that tapestry had expanded, weaving the future of the Crannogmen into the broader story of the realm. As she descended the steps, a retainer approached, handing her a report. "My lady, there's been sight of bandits along the western edges of the swamps. They've been harassing traders. Should we deploy scouts?" "My lady." The title still felt strange, as though it belonged to someone else. But she nodded, lips pressed together in firm resolve. "Yes, send a squad of our best trackers. We'll route them through the watery paths. If the bandits refuse to yield, we'll drive them out by force. The neck must remain safe." The retainer bowed and hurried off. Meera handed her spear to a guard, then stepped inside the command tower. Maps lined the walls, maps she had helped update, showing each channel, each hidden grove, each potential watchpoint. Over them, pinned in pride of place, was the letter from Riverrun, bearing the official seals of the assembly. A swirl of excitement and responsibility coursed through her veins. This was her life now, protecting her people, forging alliances, standing as the voice of the Crannogmen. The role of a great house was not just ceremony, it was power tempered by duty. She felt the weight of it constantly, and yet it was a weight she chose to carry. Her father was standing by a window slit, looking out at the marsh beyond. She joined him. He gave her a small smile. "It's begun in earnest. There's no turning back." "No," Meera agreed. "But I wouldn't turn back even if I could." They said nothing for a while, letting the quiet swirl around them. In that hush, Meera felt the presence of the old gods, the rustle of reeds in the breeze, and the faint echo of Jojen's prophetic words. She was forging a new path, a new identity for House Reed, for the Crannogmen, and perhaps for the North itself. Time passed. The neck became an increasingly vital crossroads. Merchants praised the new security, though they grumbled about the strict tolls House Reed imposed, a necessary revenue to maintain the garrisons and fortifications. Lords traveling between the north and the southern kingdoms learned to pay respect to the new guardians, their prior scorn tempered by the knowledge that House Reed was recognized by the realm. Meera received invitations from other lords, feasts, and councils. She attended some, forging friendships with younger nobles who were not so bound by the prejudices of old. She heard talk of a new age, where the seven kingdoms might drift apart or come together, depending on who held power. She listened, observing how the game was played. She was no stranger to cunning, having learned it in the swamps, but the petty intrigues of court still left her uneasy. Her father sometimes traveled with her, but more often stayed in the neck, ensuring Greywater Watch's secrets remained secure. There were rumors that House Reed possessed mystical knowledge, that they could use spells to move their castle, or that they had ties to the children of the forest. Meera let those rumors swirl without confirming or denying. Fear and mystique could be a powerful shield. In the second year of House Reed's ascension, a small crisis erupted when a detachment of knights from the Westerlands, led by a proud minor lord, attempted to cross the neck without paying the toll or waiting for an escort. They were ambushed by marsh dwellers, who used darts and nets to disarm them. Word spread quickly that the Crannogmen had humiliated the knights. Meera realized this could spark conflict if not handled diplomatically. She personally met with the detained knights. The minor lord, Sir Gladen Lannet, blustered with outrage. "You have no right to impede our passage," he roared. "We were simply traveling to the north to trade. This is an outrage." Meera regarded him calmly, her spear resting against the table in the tent where they convened. "You violated our customs. Since we have been recognized as a great house and guardians of this region, we have the right to ensure safe passage for all who come through. If you refuse to cooperate, you undermine our authority. We cannot allow that, for the sake of everyone." He sneered. "Who gave you the authority to extort travelers with tolls?" She was silent a moment, forcing down her anger. The entire assembly of lords at Riverrun recognized House Reed. The rest of the realm has accepted it. If you have a complaint, you may voice it before a future council. Until then, you will pay the toll and abide by our rules, or you will not pass. His men exchanged nervous glances. They may have heard the stories, how the Crannogmen fought with poison-tipped darts and illusions in the swamp. Sir Gladen sputtered. "This is tyranny." "If tyranny means ensuring order, then so be it," Meera said coldly. "But let me offer you a chance to make amends. Pay the toll, apologize for your trespass, and I will let you and your men continue unmolested." For a long moment he looked as though he might draw his sword. But the presence of Crannog guards, each armed with a spear and net, subdued him. His men shifted uneasily, and eventually Sir Gladen grudgingly placed a small purse of gold on the table. "This is an outrage," he muttered again. "And yet you are free to go," Meera said softly, picking up the purse. "Next time, follow proper channels. No one wants needless conflict." They left, muttering curses under their breath, but they left. When news of the incident spread, some lords in the south decried House Reed's heavy-handed tactics, but others noted that the knights had disregarded local authority. Overall, it reinforced the notion that the Neck was now a regulated gateway, not a lawless swamp. And so time flowed onward. House Reed's position gradually solidified. Meera found herself in an ever more central role, a figure both respected and occasionally feared. She continued to champion the Crannogmen's ways, ensuring that their culture was not swallowed by the demands of Southern-style governance. She encouraged the training of local healers, whose knowledge of swamp herbs surpassed anything found in Maester's tomes. She supported the old traditions of canoe building, net weaving, and subtle warfare. Yet, she also embraced innovation. Using toll revenue, she funded new roads built on pilings through the shallower marsh areas, enabling trade caravans to pass without sinking into mud. She invited maesters to study the bog's unique properties, forging an exchange of knowledge that benefited all. Through her leadership, the Neck became less isolated while retaining its distinct identity. Now and then she would visit Winterfell, meeting with Bran or Rickon, updating them on progress. Bran, in his eerie calm, would listen and occasionally offer insight. Rickon, more energetic and restless, admired the growing strength of House Reed, seeing it as part of a stronger North. Their mutual respect only deepened the alliance. In the third year after House Reed's ascension, Meera journeyed back beyond the swamps to meet with King, if he could still be called that, Jon Snow, who had been crowned briefly and then relinquished much of his claim. He dwelled in the north, half a legend, half a man. They spoke in a quiet hall, reminiscing about the days before the long night ended. Jon looked tired, older than his years. He seemed relieved that the realm was finding some semblance of peace. Meera could see in his eyes that he carried the weight of too many battles, too many losses. On her return home from that meeting, she felt a renewed determination to ensure peace reigned. Every step forward, every negotiation, every fortification, these were bricks in the wall that kept chaos at bay. And thus, the story of Meera Reed and House Reed became woven into the tapestry of the Seven Kingdoms. What began as a daring ambition to claim a seat among the great houses turned into a transformative chapter for the Neck. Farmers in the Riverlands found safer passage north. Merchants from White Harbor saw richer trade, and the North itself slept more soundly, knowing that should any invader march upon them, they would first have to contend with the cunning guardians of the marshes. Years later, on a crisp morning when the bog mists curled around the half-rebuilt towers of Moat Cailin, Meera stood on the ramparts with her spear in hand. She had married, not for a political advantage, but for shared values, and her partner, a Crannogman of skill and quiet valor, was out on patrol with the Marsh Scouts. They had a child, a strong-willed daughter who was as comfortable wading through lily-choked waters as climbing the steps of a keep. In the distant future, that child might succeed Meera, continuing the lineage of a great house that was still writing its story. As Meera looked out over the green-brown patchwork of swamp and stone, she could almost feel the pulse of the old gods in the mud, in the water, in the ancient cypress trees. A hush fell over the marsh as a flock of birds took flight, their calls echoing. She smiled, thinking of Jojen's gentle voice, of the ephemeral visions that had guided him. If he could see her now, he would know that his faith was not misplaced. House Reed had stepped out of the shadows to claim a rightful place in shaping the realm's destiny. She whispered into the breeze, words meant for the ghosts of memory. "We are here, we stand for the Neck, and the Neck stands for us." The mists parted briefly, revealing the vast sweep of land. Within that silent breath of space, Meera Reed felt a sense of profound satisfaction. She had carried her people's hopes on her spear, on her net, on her shoulders. Despite the doubts and scorn of some, she had stood firm, forging alliances and confronting threats. In doing so, she had proven what her father and the Crannogmen had always known: that greatness need not be loud or vainglorious. It could be subtle as a rippling marsh pool, swift as a darting fish, and unyielding as the ancient peat beneath the water's surface. Thus, House Reed had claimed its place, and the Crannogmen were no longer overlooked. Their domain, the watery labyrinth of the Neck, was now recognized as a bastion of both nature's mystery and the realm's defense. Meera Reed, the hunter who once traveled with a boy named Bran beyond the wall, had become a lady of consequence, a protector of her people, and a living testament that the quietest among us can sometimes shape the loudest destinies. She turned from the ramparts, descending into the bustling courtyard where the clamor of workers and soldiers blended with the croak of frogs. The world still teemed with challenges, but there was a glow of possibility in every corner of the Neck. In time, perhaps, the scars of war would heal entirely, and a new generation would thrive under the steadfast guardianship of House Reed. And if the day came when darkness rose once more, the Crannogmen would be ready. Nets in hand, spears at the ready, hearts unafraid. For theirs was a heritage of resilience, honed in marsh and mist, blessed by ancient traditions. Meera Reed walked into her keep, head held high, her future unwinding before her like reeds upon the still waters, strong and rooted deep in the shifting sands of fate. Meera Reed woke early, before the sun had lifted above the marshes, and sat quietly by the window in her personal quarters at Moat Cailin. The fortress was half wrapped in fog, the air damp and cool, the walls glistening from a light overnight rain. She was used to the damp. She had grown up in the Neck after all. But since the day her house had been proclaimed a great house, even the moisture in the air seemed charged with significance. She might have been only a Crannogwoman, as Southerners like to call her, but her decisions now carried greater weight than they ever had. And if she was honest with herself, sometimes that burden made her stomach twist with both excitement and the edge of dread. She rose and crossed the narrow chamber, pulling a plain tunic over her long-sleeved shirt. The old Crannogman ways did not dwell on finery, but her status demanded at least a subtle nod to Westerosi expectations. A doublet woven from thick marsh-dyed cloth hung on a peg. She carefully slid her arms through it, fastening the laces near the collar. Across the chest, embroidered in dark green thread, was the black lizard lion of House Reed. It was strange to see it so prominently displayed on her own clothing, but times had changed. She glanced at the small hand mirror perched on a wooden side table. A reflection looked back, brown hair braided tightly behind her head, eyes alert. She inhaled, exhaled, then turned toward the corridor, footsteps hushed on the stone floor. Beyond her chamber, the corridors were still coming to life. Guards stood at intervals clad in the mottled cloaks and boiled leather that helped them blend into the marshes. They bowed their heads slightly as she passed, the respect still something she was learning to accept. She had never aspired to be Lady Reed in the way so many other ladies of the realm acted, swathed in jewels and velvet. She was a hunter, a traveler, a fighter. Yet fate had placed her in this position, and she would see it through with every ounce of her dedication. She moved down a winding stairwell, emerging into the courtyard. The old stone keep of Moat Cailin had been partially restored over the past few years, and though some towers remained crumbling ruins, most were shored up with scaffolding or fresh masonry. In the center of the courtyard, a group of workers huddled over new timbers, measuring and sawing, always building. Wagons delivered along the causeway that cut through the swamp had brought stone from various quarries. Crannog craftsmen used peat and special moss lime to seal the foundations against the wet ground. Little by little, the fortress was reclaiming its ancient dignity. She spotted her father, Howland Reed, standing beneath a wooden awning where plans were spread on a rough-hewn table. A handful of architects and maesters pored over drawings. Meera approached, the hush of her footfalls lost beneath the rasp of parchment. Her father looked up. "Meera," he said, and gave a gentle smile. His own eyes were weary from too many sleepless nights, but still lit with the quiet spark of determination that had always defined him. "We're discussing expansions to the western tower. The initial plan was to reinforce it for a better vantage, but the ground there is soft. The engineers worry the tower might tilt unless we sink more support piles. Meera surveyed the small charcoal sketch, recognizing the section of the fortress that overlooked a wide expanse of reeds and shallow water. We can't risk another partial collapse, she said, remembering how part of a wall had crumbled during a storm last year. If we have to sink more piles, let's do it. Better to spend the extra labor and time now than rebuild in 2 years. One of the maesters, a thin, silver-haired man wearing a chain with many links, inclined his head. Sound wisdom, my lady. We'll note it and proceed. She exchanged a glance with her father. Sometimes she heard the older men call her my lady, and still felt the impulse to glance over her shoulder to see whom they spoke to. Even so, she kept her composure. Carry on, she told the group. I trust your guidance on this. As they stepped away, her father exhaled. The more we expand, the more complicated the building becomes. Once we Crannogmen live simply in our floating huts and hidden strongholds. Now we raise a fortress that will stand for generations. Meera felt a pang of wistfulness. I know, sometimes I miss the old ways, but if we can protect our people better, if we can ensure no foreign army marches up this causeway unopposed, it's worth the changes. He gently laid a hand on her shoulder. You've grown into this role with more grace than anyone could have expected. I'm proud of you. She lowered her eyes, grateful for his praise. Thank you. A call sounded at the gates. Meera turned to see a small party approaching on horseback, the silhouettes blurred in the lingering morning mist. She motioned for the guards to open the main gates, and soon the riders emerged into the courtyard. Banners fluttered, gray and white, sporting the direwolf. Winterfell's crest. Meera straightened as the party dismounted. At the forefront stood Rickon Stark, hair thick and dark, his features grown into a strong jaw and serious eyes. He had come a long way since the little boy Meera remembered running wild with the direwolf pup, Shaggy Dog, at his side. She strode forward, arms outstretched in greeting. Rickon, she said, and the name felt familiar on her tongue. Welcome. We weren't expecting you. He smiled, that quick grin that made him look younger than the near 20 named days he now claimed. I rode ahead of my retinue to see the progress here. We've heard news that Moat Cailin is practically new built, a formidable seat for House Reed. The walls still stand on old foundations, she said with a note of humor, but we've done our best to patch every crack. He looked around. You've done more than patch. The transformation is obvious, even to someone who hasn't an architect's eye. He gave her father a respectful nod as well, then turned his attention back to Meera. I come with tidings from Winterfell, though I'd prefer to share them in private. Things are stirring beyond the north. Bran wants me to keep you informed. Neo. She felt her stomach tighten. Of course. Let's go inside. They ascended the steps to a modest hall that served as Meera's seat within Moat Cailin. Although not as grand as the Great Hall of Winterfell, it was sturdy and newly furnished, the walls hung with tapestries depicting the swampy expanse of the neck. A large weirwood carved seat stood at one end, not quite a throne but enough to command authority. Meera usually chose a simpler chair off to the side, but on days when official business demanded, she sat in the seat facing her people. Rickon removed his gloves and ran a hand through his hair. We've heard troubling whispers from the western coasts. Some say the Ironborn are stirring again, uniting under a new Greyjoy banner. Others speak of a possible alliance between minor lords of the Westerlands who are desperate to restore Lannister glory. I'm not sure how reliable the rumors are, but we can't risk ignoring them. Bran wants to ensure the causeway is guarded against any southern incursion. Meera nodded, crossing her arms. We expected some pushback when the neck became more than just a muddy stretch to be ignored. If certain lords resent our newfound authority, they may look for ways to test us. Nani. Rickon took a seat. I doubt we're in danger of immediate war, but we must keep watch. There's also talk that in the Vale, Lord Royce's nephew is raising voices against the next tolls. He claims it hampers free movement. If that sentiment spreads, it could cause friction. She grimaced. The tolls are necessary. We don't overcharge. The coin pays for the soldiers patrolling the causeway and helps repair the roads. Better that travelers contribute something for the protection they receive, rather than risk bandits or flooding. Now, of course, Rickon said. I personally think it's fair, but you know how these things go. Some lord in his stone keep 1,000 leagues away will say it's all extortion, and soon enough, half the realm is whispering that House Reed grows rich by strangling commerce. They'll forget how the wars burned half the kingdoms to ash, how bandits roam at will in the more lawless stretches of the riverlands. They'll forget that the neck helps keep order. Meera clenched her jaw. She remembered how easily the southern lords had dismissed her people in River Run, how only the cunning support of the Starks and a handful of other allies had tipped the scales. If they threaten us, I'll show them what extortion really looks like, she said with a flash of her old spirit. But hopefully, it won't come to that. We want peace. We've had enough war. Rickon sat back, crossing one leg over the other. Bran foresees that the realm is entering a time of subtle shifts. The great houses that once dominated are weakened, some almost extinct. We, the Starks, remain, but we know how fragile everything can be. House Reed is now recognized, forging a new path. The Tyrells are gone, replaced by a dozen lesser lords in the Reach. The Stormlands, well, it's not clear who truly rules there. The Dornish are quiet, as always, but who knows what moves in their deserts. 9. Meera remembered the swirl of banners at River Run, how it felt like a tapestry frayed at the edges, each thread pulling a different direction. We'll be vigilant. If there's anything I've learned, it's that the old ways can guide us through new challenges. The Crannogmen thrive by adjusting to the swamp's changes. We'll do the same with politics. He grinned. I never doubted it. You, out of everyone, have always understood how to adapt. They spoke for a while longer about potential strategies, ways to smooth relations with the Vale, approaches to keep the Ironborn in check. Once they finished, Rickon rose. I'll stay for a few days, if you can spare the hospitality. I'd like to see these famed improvements to the neck with my own eyes. She offered a smile. You're always welcome here, Rickon Stark. We'll arrange quarters at once. No. They parted ways, and Meera breathed in the quiet of the hall after he left. The day felt more urgent now. She signaled one of her attendants, an older Crannogman named Garrus, who had served her father before her, to gather the captains of their garrison. The next defenses were strong, but if rumors pointed toward renewed instability, she wanted to be certain they were ready. In the meeting that followed, she stood around a large table with a map of the neck and the roads leading south. The captains were mostly Crannogmen, lean, quiet, with calm eyes and the subtle aura of men and women more used to fighting in muddy waters than riding on horseback. They carried short spears and wore leathers tinted in swampy greens and browns. We've heard that some Ironborn might test our waters, Meera told them. Their typical strategy would be coastal raids, but the White Knife is not far. They could attempt an incursion by the river if they're bold enough. We need watchers posted along key inlets. Our best archers should be stationed on vantage points overlooking any route large ships might take. Nay. One captain, a woman named Hallis, nodded gravely. We've mapped those routes extensively. I'll send out scouts tonight in small canoes to keep a close eye. If anything stirs, we'll sound the alarm. The bogs have ears everywhere. Meera turned her attention to another section of the map. And the causeway. Keep an eye on travelers who might resent the toll. We've had run-ins with proud knights before. I want them reminded, politely, that we only charge for maintenance and safety. Nay. A younger captain, barely out of his teens, straightened. Yes, my lady. We'll place extra watchmen. No violence unless they force our hand. Meera nodded, satisfied. Good. That's all for now. Dismissed. She stepped back from the table as the captains filed out. Garrus lingered behind, clearing his throat. My lady, a raven arrived from White Harbor this morning. Lord Wyman Manderley's steward requests an audience with you in the near future. Something about expanding trade deeper into the marshes. He believes there's an opportunity to gather peat and certain medicinal herbs that grow only in the neck. No. Meera rubbed her temple. Of course, the Manderleys have been strong allies and we owe them at least a hearing. Send word that I'll travel to White Harbor in a fortnight. Garrus bowed. Aye, once, my lady. Alone with the silence again, Meera let out a slow breath. Her days were so full now, councils, negotiations, defensive plans, alliances. Sometimes she longed to slip away, to vanish into the swamps with her spear and net, listening only to the calls of marsh birds and the quiet hush of reeds brushing against her canoe. Yet the memory of Jojen's unwavering gaze reminded her of the larger tapestry she now had to weave. It wasn't about her alone, or her father, or even the Crannogmen. It was about forging a lasting stability that might save countless lives when the realm's next storm inevitably arrived. She returned to her quarters and found the window had been left open. A breeze filtered in, tinged with the faint musk of damp earth. From her desk, she retrieved a thick tome, one of the books the maesters had left, detailing the construction methods used at Harrenhal centuries past. There were lessons there about building on boggy ground, ironically enough, though Harrenhal's ground was not as wet as the neck. She flipped through a few pages, scanning for anything relevant to the Western Tower expansions, but she couldn't focus. Her mind was churning with Rickon's words, the talk of the Ironborn, the Vale's grumbling. She thought of how quickly alliances could shift in Westeros, how the Starks themselves had nearly been obliterated by the Lannisters once. If House Reed was to maintain its position, they needed not only cunning but friends who would not abandon them. There was Bran, of course. Bran the Broken, some called him, though Meera thought him more whole in spirit than most. But he was distant, often lost in his own visions. Rickon was a loyal friend, a capable ally, yet still untested in the deeper waters of political treachery. Wyman Manderley was valuable, but any merchant lord had interests that might not always align with Meera's. She stared at the tapestry on her chamber wall, an image of a black lizard lion woven against gray-green threads. The flicker of candlelight made the beast look almost alive, as if it might twist free from the cloth. She wondered if one day, the rest of Westeros might see House Reed as more than a curiosity. Perhaps they already did, some with fear, some with grudging respect, some with disdain. She clasped her hands together, thinking of Jojen. Ever since his death, she sometimes sensed his presence at odd moments, as though the memory of him lingered in her peripheral vision. "We're doing it," she whispered softly, unsure if she was speaking to the ghost of Jojen or to the old gods that watched from the heart trees. "We're shaping the future. I just hope it's a good one." Night fell and torches lit the courtyard. Rickon took supper with Meera and Howland in the small hall. They dined simply on fish stew and bread, with fruit preserves brought from White Harbor. Rickon appeared content, though Meera sensed a subdued worry in his posture. After the meal they moved to a quieter alcove. She asked him about Winterfell, about how Bran fared. "Bran is, as ever," Rickon said, sipping from a cup of mulled cider. "He sees things we can't. Sometimes he speaks in riddles, sometimes in truths I don't want to hear. But I trust him. He says we must be careful, that the realm is not nearly as settled as people imagine." Meera nodded. "We'll strengthen the neck. I don't mind if they call us extortionists or bog devils, as long as we can keep their armies from tearing the north apart." "Nizakat." "Spoken like a true Reed," Rickon said with a faint smile. "You know, I remember you when I was just a boy. These fleeting glimpses. You were always so confident with your spear, but quiet. You taught Bran how to set snares." She laughed softly. "And you used to chase me around with that wild pup of yours. Shaggy Dog, was it? You tried to sneak up on me in the courtyard once." He chuckled at the memory, though a shadow flickered across his face. "Those days seem like another life. Sometimes I envy those who never left their small homes, who didn't see the wars. But the wars came for everyone, I suppose, even if they hid." Meera's thoughts drifted to the horror she'd witnessed, north of the wall and across the frozen wastes. She said nothing, but nodded. Yes, the wars found them all in the end. They parted ways, and Meera retreated to her room. She tried to sleep, but dreamt of swirling mists, of a rowboat gliding along still waters, carrying a hooded figure who whispered her name. She awoke with a start to the pale light of dawn. An unsettled feeling lingered in her chest, though she could not remember the hooded figure's face. The morning brought new tasks. Rickon accompanied her on an inspection of the causeway's guard posts. They rode on small, stout horses, more accustomed to the uneven marsh roads than the tall destriers some knights favored. Crannog soldiers guided them through a route that alternated between patches of solid ground and raised wooden walkways. Birds flapped overhead, occasionally diving into the water to snatch fish. The air smelled of moss and brine. At each guard post, they found watchmen armed with short bows and spears, quietly alert. Rickon seemed impressed by the discipline. "You've turned the neck into a place where men stand watch day and night," Not so long ago, it was considered a place where only the cunning few could survive, but not a place to station an organized force. Meera slid off her horse at the final post, walking along the plank walkway that led to a watchtower built atop a half-sunken ruin. We're combining the old ways with the new. The watchmen know how to melt into the reeds or dart through the water silently, but they also stand ready for open confrontation. The best of both worlds, I hope. Rickon stepped onto the tower's platform. From the top, one could see the causeway stretching into the distance, a thin ribbon of road flanked by swamp. A handful of travelers trudged along it, pushing a small cart. "Look there," Rickon said, pointing. "They don't seem like knights, more like peddlers. Do your men stop everyone to check for tolls?" "We do," Meera said. "But we keep the toll low for peddlers and farmers, just enough to contribute to maintenance. The guards will let them pass with minimal hassle. It's only the wealthier caravans and armed bands that pay a higher fee." He nodded, then fell silent. The sun was rising higher, illuminating the dew on the marsh grass and making the water shine in patches of gold and green. Despite the watchposts, the neck retained its haunting beauty. Standing there, Meera felt a strange surge of pride. This land, so often dismissed as a backwater, was now recognized for its importance. She remembered how many times Jojen had insisted their family's role in the world was significant. Perhaps he had seen this future in his visions. They descended the tower, remounted their horses, and made their way back toward Moat Cailin. Along the way, Rickon turned to her. "Bran told me something once. He said you were destined to protect not only him, but the entire North in your own way. I think that was a prophecy of sorts." She blinked. Bran always spoke in riddles I didn't fully understand. But I'm trying my best to live up to whatever destiny he saw. "Nay." Rickon reached out and squeezed her shoulder. "You already have." They returned to the fortress by midday, just in time to see a pair of ravens arriving at the rookery perched in one of the lesser towers. The maester who oversaw messages scurried down the steps with 2 small scrolls in hand, delivering them to Meera in the courtyard. She unrolled the first. It bore the seal of White Harbor. She scanned it quickly. "Lady Meera Reed, we welcome your forthcoming visit. Lord Wyman regrets he cannot attend to the matter personally due to ill health, but he entrusts his stewards and heir to negotiate on his behalf. We look forward to your arrival." That was expected, though it saddened her to hear Wyman's health was failing. The next scroll bore a different seal, that of the Vale. She frowned, recalling the rumors Rickon had mentioned. Breaking the wax, she read, "To Lady Meera Reed of the Neck. I, Lord John Royce, write to you regarding the tolls imposed upon travelers from the Vale traversing the causeway. While I do not dispute House Reed's right to maintain and defend the Neck, many in the Vale have voiced concerns over the burden these tolls place upon trade. I request a meeting to discuss the possibility of reduced fees and expedited passage for Vale merchants, particularly in times of good peace. Respectfully, Jan Royce." She handed it to Rickon, who had dismounted. He read it, eyebrows lifting. "At least it's courteous. Better than an ultimatum." "True," she said, rolling the parchment. "But if we give the Vale a reduced toll, every other region will demand the same. The entire system could unravel." "Nah." Rickon shrugged. "Then meet with Royce. Hear him out. There might be a middle ground, perhaps a discount for certain shipments, or a seasonal pass. Enough to show fairness without gutting the toll system." She nodded slowly. "I'll think on it. He's given no immediate date for a meeting, so maybe after I speak with the Manderless, I'll send word to the Vale." Rickon gave a small smile. "You're building alliances in all directions. House Reed is busier than some royal courts I've seen." Meera managed a wry chuckle. "I never realized how complicated the politics could be. Perhaps I was naive when we pushed for recognition as a great house, but it's done, and we'll adapt." He placed a hand on her arm, giving a reassuring squeeze. "You're not alone in this, Meera. You have Mus Winterfell, the Manderless, the Serwins, all the northern lords who respect House Reed. That's no small thing." She mustered a smile. "Thank you." The following day, Rickon departed, heading back to Winterfell to relay what he'd seen. He left with a small escort of Stark men-at-arms and several new impressions of Moat Cailin's growing strength. Meera stood on the ramparts, watching him vanish into the haze at the far end of the causeway. It felt as though each visit from her allies confirmed just how entangled she was in the realm's affairs. There was no turning back. In the days that followed, she prepared for her journey to White Harbor. The watchers she'd sent to patrol the watery inlets reported no sign of ironborn longships, so they remained alert. A fresh wave of masons arrived from the riverlands to assist with the repairs, attracted by the coin house Reed was offering. Meera found herself mediating small disputes between the Crannogmen and the newcomers. The Crannogmen tended to dislike outsiders, even friendly ones, stomping around the marsh, while the masons complained of leeches and damp conditions. Yet they needed each other to accomplish the work. At the same time, messages arrived from lesser lords in the north, offering small tokens of support or updates on local banditry. Meera carefully read each missive, seeking patterns or trouble spots. She realized that with recognition came an avalanche of requests and responsibilities. Her father aided her, but he insisted that she learn to handle these matters personally. "You lead now, Meera," he would say, gently but firmly. "The neck looks to you, as do these allies." She took his guidance to heart. Each day she rose before dawn, oversaw the garrison's readiness, handled a half-dozen letters, then tackled the fortress expansions. In the evening, she offered counsel to villagers who came with small grievances. Sometimes, at day's end, she'd sneak out for a short paddle along the swamp's edge, letting the waters hush clear her mind. In those moments, she felt at peace, reconnecting with the simpler life she once led. The frogs croaked softly and the reeds sighed in the breeze, and she could almost see the face of Jojen in the ripples. When at last she set out for White Harbor, it was a bright morning with the promise of fair weather. She took a small retinue of Crannogmen, plus a few seasoned knights who had pledged themselves to house Reed after hearing stories of her exploits. She found it odd to have knights in her service, men in plate who'd been taught southern chivalry. But they had proven their loyalty, and their presence lent a certain weight when traveling among other lords. They rode north, following the causeway out of the swamp until it merged with the King's Road. The countryside grew less boggy, and soon they passed farmland and small hamlets. People stared as her party rode by. Some recognized her banners, the black lizard lion on gray-green, and offered tentative waves or bows. Others simply gawked. She maintained a polite face, nodding at any who greeted her, though inside she felt a flicker of relief that her domain was behind them. The dryness, the wide roads, the open skies all felt a bit foreign compared to the cloistered hush of the neck. At midday on the third day of travel, they crested a hill and saw the glint of the sea in the distance. White Harbor sprawled ahead, stone walls framing a city that bustled with trade. Masts of ships bristled in the harbor and seagulls wheeled overhead. Meera's horse tossed its head, and she patted its flank, urging it onward. As they approached the gate, the guards recognized her standard and waved them through. Inside, the city was alive with market stalls, fishmongers hawking their catches, smithies ringing with the clang of metal. The air smelled of salt and baked bread and fish stew. Narrow cobblestone streets twisted among tall stone houses. Here and there, Meera saw flags representing visiting merchants from Bravos or Pentos, evidence of White Harbor's cosmopolitan nature. A steward in Manderley livery guided them toward the new castle, a stately structure perched above the harbor, half fortress and half palace. Marble statues decorated the entrance, depicting mermaids and tridents. Wyman Manderley's ancestors had come from the south, but they had fully embraced northern ways, though with a flair for extravagance. A gatehouse led into a courtyard lined with hedges. Servants appeared to tend the horses, while Meera and her retinue dismounted. She was greeted by Wyman's heir, Wylis Manderley, a tall man who carried himself with more restraint than his jovial father. His hair was flecked with gray at the temples, and he wore well-fitted garments embroidered with a merman. "Lady Meera," he said, bowing. "Welcome to White Harbor. My father wishes he could greet you personally, but his health, it's not been good." Meera inclined her head. "I'm sorry to hear that. Lord Wyman has been a generous ally. I hope he recovers soon." Wylis offered a wan smile. "He has his good days and bad days. He's strong enough to speak with you, but not for long. Come, I'll bring you to him." They passed through archways into a large hall, the floor polished marble. Mosaics of sea life adorned the walls, and a salty breeze drifted through open windows overlooking the water. White Harbor had always struck Meera as half a different world. So much stone and marble, so many grand embellishments, So unlike the raw nature of the neck. She walked behind Wireless, aware of her damp boots and the faint whiff of swamp that clung to her cloak. Yet no one dared sneer. House Reed might be new to the top tier of power, but it was recognized, and that carried weight. Wireless led her through a side passage to Lord Wyman's private chambers. Inside, she found the large man propped on a cushioned bench near a window. He appeared thinner than she remembered, though still broad of chest, with a soft roundness that had once been more pronounced. A blanket covered his legs, and an attendant stood nearby, ready with a flagon of water. Wyman beckoned Meera closer. "My dear Lady Reed," he said, his voice still carrying a hearty ring even if subdued by illness. "Come, sit." Meera took a seat in a nearby chair. "My lord, I hope you're recovering well." He chuckled, a low sound that ended in a slight cough. "I recover from old age if that's possible. They say I have something in my lungs. But enough of that. Tell me how the neck fares. I hear you've turned Moat Cailin into a veritable fortress, and the causeway is well guarded." She nodded. "Yes, we've made progress. The toll system remains stable, and we're pushing back bandits who once haunted the marsh edges. We still have a long way to go, but it's better than it was." "Excellent. Excellent." He took a slow breath, then gave her a sidelong look. "My son has told you I'm too weak for much business, but I insisted on seeing you. There's something I wish to discuss personally, while I still can. It concerns the future of our alliance." "Nah." Her posture straightened. "Of course." Wyman's lips curved in a small grin. "I have always believed the neck to be vital to the North's prosperity. That's why we supported you in River Run. I also see that if we unify the water routes, White Harbors, shipping lanes, and the swamp channels, there's a fortune in trade for both of us. The Manderleys can bring goods from Essos, the free cities, even from the south, and then send them deeper into the land by way of the neck." "Nay." Meera nodded, understanding. "You want to establish a more direct route that penetrates the marsh from the White Knife?" He let out another wheezing chuckle. Precisely. We'd need your help to find navigable channels. We could establish small port towns in the less treacherous parts of the swamp. It wouldn't be easy. Dredging might be required or constructing artificial levees. But think of the benefit. House Reed collects tolls on shipping, House Manderley profits from expanded trade, and the North gains access to wealth and goods that otherwise might pass us by. No. She liked the idea, but caution flickered within her. It could attract unwanted attention from the south. If the route is too profitable, we might see rivalry or even sabotage. Also, we must ensure we're not destroying the swamp's natural defenses by dredging. He waved a hand slowly. "I am not suggesting we ruin your natural defenses. We'd be selective. My maesters have studied the old charts. There are certain channels that might be made navigable without harming the greater ecosystem. Your Crannogmen would of course oversee the project, ensuring no harm is done to the neck's unique environment." "Nen." Meera pursed her lips. "It's tempting, I admit. Increased trade could fund further fortifications, better equipment, and improved livelihoods for the Crannogmen. We've always survived on frogs, fish, and cunning, but this could bring new opportunities." Wyman's eyes glinted. "And you'd have the coin to pay soldiers if ever you need them. War is an ugly thing, but preparation is wise." "Nondia." She took a moment to consider. The project aligned with many of her goals: stability, prosperity, defense. Yet she also recalled her father's stories of how outsiders had long tried to exploit the neck. This time, House Reed was in control, not an underling to some distant lord. Maybe that was the difference. She inclined her head. "I think we can explore it, my lord. Let us form a small committee. Your maesters, our Crannog scouts, maybe an engineer or two from the Riverlands. We'll map out potential routes, estimate costs, and measure environmental impact. If it seems feasible, we'll proceed." Wyman's face lit with satisfaction. "Wonderful. I knew you'd see the potential, and fear not, I won't push it faster than you deem wise." He shifted slightly on the bench, then drew a thin, wheezing breath. "There's another matter, more personal. My son Wireless, as you know, is my heir. He'll see this through after I'm gone. He's a capable man, but I'd like to strengthen the bond between our houses, perhaps more intimately." Meera caught the implication at once. She had heard rumors that Wyman might propose a marriage alliance to truly seal the Manderley-Reed relationship. Her immediate reaction was guarded. She was not opposed to the idea of forging ties through marriage, but she'd married already, quietly, a Crannogman of her own choosing, for love and partnership, not politics. That was well known among her people, though they rarely spoke of it beyond the Neck's borders. Perhaps word had not reached White Harbor. She kept her tone neutral. I value your house, my lord, but my own path in that regard has already been set. I'm sure Wylis could find a suitable match within the north to bolster alliances. Nanavde. Wyman nodded thoughtfully, though disappointment flickered in his eyes. So the rumors were true then. You married a Crannogman from your own ranks. Well, I can hardly fault you for that. Still, I had to ask. If not you, then perhaps a match with your sister or a cousin, someone of House Reed. Strengthening our ties might benefit both families. Strengthening our ties might benefit both families. Meera thought of her cousins. Some might be open to it, though few had shown a desire for life outside the marshes. I'll speak to my father, she said carefully. It could be beneficial. Our next generation might cement the alliance we're forging now. Wyman appeared satisfied enough, though a faint sigh escaped him. I appreciate it. Now, I've taken too much of your time. My stewards will meet with you tomorrow to discuss the initial steps for the shipping route. Meera stood, bowing slightly. Thank you, Lord Wyman. I wish you swift recovery. Leaving his chamber, she mulled over the idea of a deeper alliance. Political marriages were a staple of the great houses, but House Reed was new to that game. Still, if it meant a long-lasting bond with White Harbor, it might be worth exploring. She only hoped her family would see it the same way. She was escorted to comfortable guest quarters, a spacious room with windows facing the sea. The gulls cried outside, and the tide crashed softly against the harbor walls. She set her spear in a corner, unfastened her cloak, and let out a slow breath. So many decisions lay before her. After a brief moment to freshen up, she decided to wander the corridors, letting her mind work through the possibilities. She passed servants in hushed conversation, saw minor lords or traders carrying ledgers, and observed the opulence of White Harbor's carved pillars and gleaming floors. Eventually, she found herself in a small courtyard with a gnarled old weirwood tree at the center. It was rare for a keep in the south to maintain a godswood, but the Manderleys had long embraced northern customs. She approached the weirwood, its bone-white bark etched with a solemn face. Red leaves rustled overhead. Kneeling, she pressed a palm to the trunk. A wave of memory swept through her, the old god's presence in Winterfell's godswood, the swirling snow, the hush of an ancient power older than men. She felt a sudden pang for the quiet corners of Greywater Watch, for the illusions of safety. Closing her eyes, she let a silent prayer form, though not in any specific words, just a feeling, a plea for guidance. She stayed like that for a long moment, the hush enveloping her. When she rose, she felt a measure of clarity. The world beyond the Neck was vast, with 1,000 moving pieces. But she would hold firm to what she knew: loyalty to her people, respect for the land, and the cunning to keep House Reed secure in this swirling sea of power. In the days that followed, she delved into detailed discussions with Wylis Manderley's stewards. They spread maps across a long table, marking possible routes from the White Knife into the deeper channels of the Neck. Maesters offered opinions on how to reinforce banks against erosion. Crannog scouts explained which areas were too laden with quicksand or hidden sinkholes. The conversation was spirited, often punctuated by references to old legends or incomplete records from centuries past. Meera listened intently, chiming in with her first-hand knowledge of the swamp. She insisted on environmental caution, ensuring that no large-scale destruction of the reeds or poisoning of the water would occur. The stewards found her requests reasonable if somewhat unusual for lords who typically saw only profit. The Crannogmen who accompanied her added their own insights, pointing out that the Neck had survived by balancing carefully with nature. A preliminary plan emerged. 2 main channels would be cleared and partially dredged, with small harbors built on marginally higher ground at the edges of the marsh. These would serve as transshipment points, where shallow draft barges could carry goods deeper into the Neck, while larger ships remained in White Harbor. Over time, if the demand proved sufficient, a handful of taverns, storage barns, and inns might spring up around these new wharves. Though the discussions went well, Meera remained cautious. She knew that once coin and ambition converged, New issues might arise. She made sure every step of the plan included oversight by House Reed, so no unscrupulous merchants tried to bribe or bypass Crannog authority. Toward the end of her stay, she visited Wyman Manderley once more. He was seated beside a window, gazing at the sea. A tray of half-eaten fish pies sat on a nearby table, a testament to his enduring appetite despite his illness. When he spotted her, he beckoned for her to sit. "So, Lady Meera, are you satisfied with our arrangements?" he asked, voice softer than before. She nodded. "For now, yes. We have a blueprint. I'll bring it back to the Neck and confer with my father. If all seems agreeable, we'll send word to proceed." He gave a faint smile. "Good. I want to see White Harbor and the Neck prosper together. We might be parted by land, but we share the water." She couldn't help but return the smile. "Indeed. May this be the start of something that benefits the entire North." He offered his hand, and she clasped it gently. She could feel how thin his skin had become, the bones prominent beneath. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "It means much to me, seeing House Reed thrive. Your father was always a loyal friend to Ned Stark, and that loyalty has extended far. I hope you carry it forward." "I will," she promised. With that, she left him to rest, her mind filled with possibilities. She spent one last night in White Harbor, hosted by Wylis at a modest feast where they served roast waterfowl and river trout. Then at dawn, she and her retinue mounted up, weaving their way back through the bustling streets until they passed the city gates. The open road beckoned, leading them home. Their journey southward was uneventful for the first 2 days. The weather remained fair, though colder as clouds gathered on the horizon. On the third evening, they found an inn near the crossroads leading to the marsh. It was a humble establishment, frequented by travelers heading north or south. Meera decided to stop there for the night. Inside, the common room was lively with merchants, sellswords, and a few peasants. Meera took a corner table, her retinue arrayed around her. She wore a cloak that partially concealed her house sigil. Though she was no longer a simple traveler, she still preferred to avoid drawing too much attention if she could. They ordered ale, stew, and bread. As they ate, Meera listened to the chatter of nearby patrons. She caught fragments of conversation, talk of the harvest, rumors about disputes in the Westerlands, tales of bandits harassing caravans. Then, a pair of men at a nearby table caught her ear. One had a ragged gray beard and wore a patched leather vest. The other was younger, with a hawkish nose and quick eyes. They spoke in hushed tones, glancing around warily. "Telling you the Neck's become a blasted fortress," the older man said, scratching at his beard. "Used to be a man could slip through, avoid them causeway tolls. Now they've got watchers everywhere. Tried to pass a little caravan of goods I had acquired, but those bog rats snared 2 of my men with nets. We barely got away." The younger man scowled. "Ain't right. That bog devil woman, heard she's some big lady now, thinks she can keep us out. We'll see about that. There's talk of a group forming, real quiet-like, to test them. Maybe set fire to some watchtowers. Send a message. We can't just hand over coin for the privilege of using the only damn road north." Neon wines. Meera's grip tightened on her mug. The men were obviously criminals or at least unscrupulous smugglers. She felt anger welling inside her, but she forced her expression to remain calm. Causing a scene in the inn might solve nothing. Instead, she gently signaled one of her knight. Leaning close, she murmured, "Keep an ear on those 2. If they leave, follow them discreetly. I want to know if they plan an attack on the Neck." The knight gave a subtle nod. Meera returned her attention to her stew, but her mind churned. If these men were more than idle talkers, there could be a small but dangerous band of outlaws plotting to strike her watchtowers. That was precisely the kind of incident that could undermine the Neck's stability. She would not allow it. They finished supper, took rooms in the inn. True to her instruction, the knight lingered in the common room, blending in with other travelers. Sometime past midnight, a soft knock came at Meera's door. She rose, unlatched it. The knight entered, inclining his head. "They left," he said in a hushed voice. "Rode south with a pack of 5 men. I tailed them for a while. They're meeting up with someone near the old Stonebridge crossing, apparently. Heard them mention a plan to sabotage the Causeway Watchtower a day's ride from here, near the border of the swamp. They want to set it ablaze." Meera felt a surge of cold fury. We're leaving at first light. We'll ride hard to get ahead of them or intercept them before they reach the tower. The knight nodded. Yes, my lady. They rose before dawn, packing quickly. A few drowsy stable hands helped saddle the horses. The innkeeper seemed surprised at their early departure, but asked no questions, especially when Meera tossed him a silver stag for the trouble. They rode at a brisk pace, outpacing the usual morning traffic on the road. Meera pressed them onward, ignoring the chilly drizzle that began to fall. By noon they reached the outskirts of the swamp. The road narrowed. The ground grew softer. She knew the watchtower in question, a relatively new post built to watch for raiders or bandits approaching from the south. If these would-be saboteurs got there first, the tower might be destroyed. Her retinue sped along the causeway. Mist clung to the tall grasses, water pooled in low spots. One of her Crannogmen scouts pointed to a faint set of fresh hoofprints at the road's edge, half submerged in mud. They belonged to more than one rider. Possibly the outlaws. Meera turned to her group. We split. Half of you continue on the causeway to the watchtower. Warn them. The rest, come with me through the reeds. We might flank the outlaws if they're hiding off the road. Now. They obeyed without hesitation. She directed the knights to remain with her. Then, guiding their horses off the causeway, they navigated a narrow path known only to the Crannogmen. The horses snorted, splashing through muddy water. Reeds rustled overhead, and the pungent scent of the marsh filled the air. They picked their way for half an hour, the scout scanning the ground for signs of passage. At last, they dismounted, tying the horses in a sheltered thicket. Meera led them on foot, spears in hand, stepping carefully on clumps of grass that held firmer ground. The knight behind her muttered curses under his breath every time he sank up to his ankles in muck, but none complained openly. Suddenly, the scout raised a hand in warning. Meera froze, listening. Voices drifted through the mist, somewhere just ahead, near a cluster of willow trees that drooped low over the water. She motioned for her group to crouch. Carefully, she parted the reeds, peering through the gaps. A small band of men and one woman stood at the water's edge. She recognized the older man from the inn by his ragged gray beard. A couple of the others wore patchy cloaks, swords sheathed at their hips. They seemed agitated, arguing. The younger man with the hawkish nose knelt beside a canoe, adjusting something that looked like a small cask of oil or pitch. This is too risky, one outlaw muttered. We'll never get out of the neck alive once we torch that tower. The gray-bearded man spat. The neck's not that big, fool. We just slip away under cover of night. Show them bog devils they can't push us around. Narnisati. Worth a bounty or two, the younger man added, standing up with a grin. Plus, I hear there's a dozen southern merchants who'd pay good coin to see the next watchers crippled. Meera felt her blood boil. So they weren't just disgruntled smugglers. They were paid saboteurs. She glanced at her companions, 3 Crannogmen scouts and 2 knights. They had surprise on their side, but the outlaws also seemed armed. She counted 6. She was confident in her skill, but she had to be careful. Signaling silently, she motioned for the scouts to circle around and flank them. The 2 knights and she would approach from the front. With luck, they could surround the saboteurs before they fled. As soon as the scouts vanished into the reeds, Meera gripped her spear, nodded to the knights, and rose. They pushed through the reeds, water splashing around their ankles. The outlaws whirled, hands flying to hilts. Meera stepped forward, voice cold. This is House Reed territory. Lay down your weapons. They stared at her, momentarily unsure. The hawkish-nosed man sneered. Look, boys, it's the bog devil lady herself. One knight brandished his sword. Better watch that mouth. You're outnumbered. The older man spat at the ground. Outnumbered? I see 3 of you. We're 6. He never finished the sentence. A Crannogmen scout emerged from behind, net in hand, and flung it. The weighted corners wrapped around one outlaw's upper body, tangling his arms and bringing him down with a splash. Another scout appeared on the opposite side, arrow nocked, aimed at the group. The outlaws froze, counting more foes than they realized. Meera advanced, spear tip gleaming. Drop your weapons, now! 2 outlaws immediately obeyed, letting swords clatter into the shallows. The hawkish-nosed man growled but began to lower his blade. The older man's eyes darted, searching for a gap. He raised his sword in a desperate slash toward Meera. With a swift move honed by years of training, she knocked it aside with the haft of her spear, then jabbed the butt end into his chest. He stumbled back, winded, and one of her knights seized him by the collar. In a heartbeat, it was over. The outlaws were disarmed, the cask of pitch left bobbing in the water. The man caught in the net flailed until a scout yanked him onto a patch of firmer ground. Mud streaked his face as he coughed and cursed. Meera stepped toward the older man. Your plot is finished. You think you can undermine the neck with a single act of sabotage. You'd do better to fear what happens next. He glared at her, panting. We only wanted free passage. You Crannogmen think you own the damn road. Well, we got friends in the south. They'll come back in greater numbers. Meera's voice dropped to a chilling calm. Then we'll face them too. For now, you'll face justice. No. She had her scouts bind the outlaws' wrists and march them back to the causeway. Once there, they reunited with the other half of her retinue, who had already warned the watchtower. The watch commander looked relieved to see that they'd prevented the sabotage. What do we do with them? A knight asked, nudging one of the bound prisoners with his boot. Meera regarded the outlaws. Execution was always an option for saboteurs, especially in such a tumultuous realm. But she also thought about how the neck was forging a new reputation. We'll take them to Moat Cailin, she said. They'll stand trial for attempted arson and conspiracy. If found guilty, they'll pay for their crime. House Reed will see justice done. She half expected the outlaws to beg or protest. Some hung their heads, resigned. The older man spat again, but said nothing further. The hawkish-nosed youth just sneered as if defiant to the last. They forced the captives to walk ahead, bound by ropes. As they headed deeper into the swamp, Meera felt the tension in her shoulders ease. Another threat, small but deadly, thwarted. Yet she knew it was likely only the beginning. Whispers of bigger threats gathered beyond the neck, from lords who found House Reed's ascendancy inconvenient to criminals who chafed at new authority. The realm had never been entirely peaceful, but in these uncertain times, any spark could flare into a blaze. When they reached Moat Cailin 2 days later, the fortress loomed through a swirl of mist, torchlight reflecting on the damp stone walls. Guards opened the gates, letting Meera's party in, and they led the prisoners to a secure dungeon. Meera climbed off her horse, limbs aching from the hard ride. She was greeted by her father near the gate, his expression tight with concern. What happened? He asked. We weren't expecting you back so soon and with captives. She gave him a quick rundown. They planned to burn one of our watchtowers. Paid saboteurs, it seems. We caught them in the act. He shook his head. Troubling, but you did well. They mentioned having friends in the south. She frowned. We should send scouts to gather more information. They might be part of a larger group. Or it could be idle boasting. No. Dodin. Howland Reed's gaze flicked toward the dungeons. We'll question them. Our methods aren't cruel, but we know how to persuade. If they have conspirators, we'll find out. That evening, Meera sat in her private chamber, listening to the drip of water that perpetually seeped through old stones. She thought of the tension in White Harbor, the conversation with Wyman Manderley about trade, the letter from Lord Royce, the saboteurs. It felt like strands of a web, each vibrating with potential conflict. She wanted to protect the neck and her people from the chaos that could erupt. Yet for all the burdens, she also felt a flicker of satisfaction. House Reed was not cowering in the marsh. They were preventing crimes, forging alliances, standing firm. They had the strength now to shape their own destiny, rather than be shaped by the ambitions of others. In the coming weeks, her father's interrogation of the outlaws revealed that a few petty lords in the southern riverlands and some unscrupulous merchants had indeed begun discussing ways to undermine the neck. Most were driven by greed, annoyed by tolls. None seemed to pose a massive organized threat at the moment, but the seeds of malice were there. Meera redoubled patrols, ensuring that any covert infiltration would be met with swift retribution. She and her father conferred late into many nights, updating their maps to highlight potential infiltration points, establishing a network of informants among travelers. Letters went out to their allies, urging them to remain vigilant. Bran Stark responded with a cryptic note that arrived by Raven. Be watchful, and do not abandon the old ways. Even the smallest pond can ripple from a distant stone. Bran. It was typical of Bran's messages, both helpful and oblique. Meera took it to mean that even if the immediate threat seemed minor, the consequences could spread. She pressed forward with fortifications, assigning more scouts along every path. She also wrote to Lord Jon Royce, inviting him to Moat Cailin to discuss tolls. Perhaps direct negotiation would stave off more radical elements in the Vale. As the months rolled on, the first stage of the joint project with the Manderleys began. Teams of surveyors and Crannog scouts set out from the swamp's edge, marking the suitable channels for shallow draft navigation. Temporary camps sprung up on bits of high ground, each flying both the Mermaid of Manderley and the Lizard Lion of Reed. The Crannogmen often looked askance at the newcomers, but Meera encouraged them to cooperate, explaining that if the Neck prospered, they would all benefit. Not all greeted the endeavor warmly. A faction of older Crannogmen complained that dredging would upset fish breeding grounds, that building new docks would bring more foreigners to their hidden realms. Meera sympathized but explained that House Reed was forging a future that required adaptability. Tradition was vital, but so was survival. Her father, Howland, remained a steady presence, though he increasingly took a background role. It was clear he wanted Meera to stand foremost as the Lady of House Reed, the recognized voice of the Neck. Sometimes in quiet moments, she would catch him watching her with a faint smile, as though seeing in her the spark of leadership he once glimpsed in himself. The saboteurs languished in the dungeon, awaiting trial before a panel of local elders and House Reed representatives. A few had spilled details on possible backers. One name that surfaced more than once was a minor lord from the Westerlands, Lord Braxton Serret, who apparently nursed old grievances against the North and saw House Reed as an easy target to disrupt. Meera considered contacting the Lannister cousins who still held sway in the Westerlands, though that region was in disarray. Diplomacy with them might be tricky. Time drifted like the slow current of the swamp, each day bringing new tasks. Meera managed trade negotiations, oversaw the training of new recruits, and occasionally slipped away to hunt frogs for old time's sake, net and spear in hand. She found solace in those hunts, the quiet stealth reminding her who she truly was beneath the mantle of leadership. The simple pleasure of stalking a plump marsh bird or fish brought her back to her roots, eased the tension that thrummed through her shoulders day after day. One late afternoon she sat at the edge of Greywater Watch, which had moved subtly through the labyrinth of waterways. The floating fortress was an enigma to outsiders, but to the Crannogmen it was home. She let her canoe drift on still water, gazing up at the twisted trees overhead. A gentle hush enveloped her, and she closed her eyes, letting the murmur of the swamp lull her. She remembered the journey with Bran, the moment Jojen had told her they were weaving destiny. She thought of how far she had come, once just a girl with a net, now a lady forging alliances, defending a causeway, holding saboteurs captive. Would Jojen have believed it? Perhaps he saw more than she realized, even at the end. At some point, she fell into a light doze, dreams flickering behind her eyelids. She awoke with a start when a dragonfly buzzed near her ear. The sky had turned the color of burnished copper, reflecting in the glassy water. She paddled back to the fortress, thoughts heavy with the weight of her responsibilities. That night, a messenger arrived from Winterfell. Rickon Stark had sent word that Lord Jon Royce was indeed traveling to the Neck, accompanied by a small retinue of Vale Knights. They intended to discuss trade concessions and toll arrangements. Meera took the letter to her father, who sat by a small fire in his chamber, studying an ancient tome of herb lore. He read it slowly, eyebrows lifting. So the Vale comes to us, in person. She nodded. It may be good. If we reach an agreement that satisfies them, they won't be swayed by outlaws complaining about the toll. He closed the tome, setting it aside. And if not, they might side with those who resent House Reed's authority. We must be ready to meet them with hospitality, but also firmness. She gazed into the fire. I'll do what I must. A day before Lord Royce's arrival, Meera prepared Moat Cailin to receive the guests. She had the floors swept, the courtyard tidied, the walls lined with torches to banish the swamp's perpetual gloom. She instructed her cooks to prepare a feast showcasing local fare, fish pies, crayfish stew, spiced frogs' legs, and strong ale from barley grown on firmer patches of land. She wanted to display the next character without appearing crude or unwelcoming. When the Vale party arrived, a damp fog clung to the air, though no rain fell. Meera greeted Lord Jan Royce in the courtyard. He was a tall man with broad shoulders, clad in sturdy plate engraved with runic symbols. His face was stern, but he inclined his head politely. Behind him, half a dozen knights and retainers waited, their armor shining despite the gloom. "Welcome to Moat Cailin," Meera said in a clear voice. "I trust your journey was safe." Royce gave a small bow. "We encountered no trouble, thanks to your watchful guards. The causeway is as well patrolled as rumored." She led them inside. In the main hall, they divested themselves of cloaks and helmets, servants bringing towels to wipe away the damp. Royce admired the hall's tapestries, which depicted scenes of Crannog life, canoes gliding under moonlight, warriors with nets bringing down large waterfowl. "Your hall is unique," he commented, which Meera took as a polite euphemism for different from the grand feudal style of the Vale. "Thank you," she replied, not unkindly. "We built on what was left of the ancient fortress, adding touches that reflect our heritage." They sat at a long table. Meera took the seat of honor with Royce at her left and her father at her right. The knights arrayed themselves along the table, while Crannog warriors stood at intervals, watchful. Food was brought forth, and Meera invited Royce to partake. He was cordial, though she sensed an undercurrent of tension in his posture. When the meal was underway, he cleared his throat. "I'll not dance around the matter, Lady Reed. I come representing many lords of the Vale who find the toll on the causeway burdensome. They argue that we share no direct border with you, nor any enmity, so why must we pay each time our merchants travel north?" "Nay." Meera sipped her ale, choosing her words carefully. "The causeway is part of the neck, which belongs to House Reed, just as the Vale's mountain passes belong to House Aaron or its regents. We maintain it, patrol it, and protect it. The toll is used for that purpose. We're not trying to fleece travelers, we're ensuring safety. Without patrols, bandits would run rampant, or the road might wash out in bad weather." "Nay." Royce nodded, though his expression remained thoughtful. "Yes, but it has grown more expensive over time. When the neck was less organized, travelers often simply passed through unimpeded." She set her mug down. "When the neck was unorganized, armies marched through at will, or criminals preyed on innocent travelers. That was hardly ideal. We improved order, but that order isn't free. Now, Howland Reed added quietly, "In the Vale, are there not fees for using certain roads or passages, especially near the Eyrie? I recall hearing of road wardens collecting coin to maintain mountain passes." Royce hesitated. "Indeed, but the charges are minimal." Meera sensed a potential opening. "Perhaps we can negotiate a similar rate for Vale merchants, reflecting the recognized friendship between our lands. We can't simply waive the toll, that sets a precedent for everyone else to demand the same. But we might establish a treaty that reduces it under certain conditions. For instance, verified Vale caravans carrying basic trade goods might pay a smaller fee than foreign merchants or heavily armed companies." "None." Royce leaned forward. "I'd be willing to consider that. We could issue official documents from the Vale, proving a merchant is legitimate. In return, you reduce the toll to a nominal amount." Her father drummed his fingers lightly on the table. "A workable idea. But we must ensure the system isn't exploited by smugglers. We'll need a way to verify these documents." "Muidrata." Royce inclined his head. "We have methods of seal and signature in the Vale that are difficult to forge, though not impossible. But combined with your watcher's vigilance, it should suffice." Meera exhaled softly, relieved that they were finding common ground. "I believe this can be done. In return, the Vale acknowledges House Reed's authority over the causeway and the right to collect tolls from all others. Agreed?" A faint smile tugged at Royce's lips. "Agreed. I have no wish to undermine your authority. My concern is only for the Vale's merchants. We'd sign a formal treaty if you wish." "No." She nodded. "We'll draft one. Let it be known that while the Vale enjoys a fair toll rate, we remain allies, not adversaries." They continued to discuss details, moving on to how often caravans crossed, what types of goods were transported, and so on. By the feast's end, they had the framework of an arrangement. Meera felt a weight lift from her shoulders. This was precisely the sort of diplomacy that could stave off future tensions. She was grateful Royce had come in person, rather than letting matters fester or, worse, fall into the hands of bandits. Before retiring, Royce approached Meera privately, away from the chatter of knights. "Lady Reed," he said, "for what it's worth, I respect what you're doing here. Bringing order to the Neck is no small feat. I knew Ned Stark well. He spoke highly of your father. I think if he were alive now, he'd approve of your efforts." Warmth bloomed in her chest. "Thank you. That means a great deal." He gave her a curt nod, then turned to follow his retinue. The next morning, they penned the initial draft of the treaty, with maesters serving as scribes. Lord Royce placed his seal upon it. Meera and her father added House Reed's seal, and copies were made for both parties. Royce departed soon after, escorted by Crannog guides who would ensure no accidents in the swamp. After the Vale party was gone, Meera stood with her father on Moat Caelan's walls, watching the slow swirl of fog around the tower tops. "One more alliance secured," she said, her breath a faint cloud in the chill morning air. Howland gave a quiet smile. "You're learning quickly. House Reed grows stronger with each fair treaty." "Near." She glanced at him. "We still have threats. The saboteurs, the rumors of Ironborn, the possible meddling from the Westerlands. But at least we don't need to fear a Vale incursion or sabotage by their discontented traitors." He nodded. "You've done well, daughter." They stood in companionable silence, listening to the marsh birds call in the distance. Meera felt the wind shift, carrying the faint tang of salt from the deeper channels. She thought of the future, of the shipping route with White Harbor, of the watchtowers along the causeway, of the intangible sense that something larger might loom on the horizon. She could almost hear Jojen's voice. The world changes like water in a bog, swirling and sinking. Yet she was determined that House Reed would not sink, but rise to meet whatever came. She took a slow breath, gazing over the ramparts at the watery realm that stretched beyond. The Neck was her home, her responsibility, and now, in so many ways, the linchpin of northern security. Let the realm watch or whisper. She had chosen this path, and she would walk it boldly, spear in hand, ready for whatever tests the future held. Time passed. Seasons turned. The dredging and channel work with White Harbor advanced slowly but steadily. Bits of new construction dotted the marshy perimeter, small docks perched on carefully driven piles. Meera visited those sites often, ensuring the Crannogmen's concerns were addressed. So far, the environmental impact seemed manageable, and the potential for increased trade revenue was promising. She suspected that within a few more years, goods would flow from the harbor deep into the Neck with relative ease. Meanwhile, the watchers at Moat Caelan and Greywater Watch reported only sporadic incidents of banditry. The saboteurs they had captured were put on trial, found guilty and sentenced to labor on fortification works under close guard. A few died from swamp fevers or their own foolish attempts to escape, but some survived, eventually growing resigned to their fate. Meera's father took ill that autumn, though it proved less serious than she had feared. He was confined to his bed for several weeks, and she took over more of his duties, consulting him daily for counsel. She saw the lines on his face deepen, the once keen sparkle in his eyes dim slightly. It reminded her how time moved on for them all, how the future would soon be her responsibility alone. Word reached her of Lord Wyman Manderley's passing. The old lord had finally succumbed to his ailment. Wylis Manderley was now officially Lord of White Harbor. Meera sent a heartfelt letter of condolence, and a gift of rare swamp herbs that aided breathing. Though Wyman's death saddened her, she was relieved they had forged the alliance in time. The new Lord Manderley seemed committed to upholding his father's agreements. News from the south remained uncertain. The Iron Islands had a new Greyjoy lord, fierce, but apparently focused on rebuilding their own battered homeland rather than launching raids. The Westerlands were embroiled in minor feuds over gold mines and the Lannister line. The Stormlands had no clear ruling house, with various claimants stepping forward. Dorne stayed quiet as ever, rumored to be developing new trade routes across the seas. All these changes reached Meera as letters and rumors, swirling around the Neck. She recognized that the realm was in a state of flux, and House Reed stood in a delicate yet pivotal position. That winter, she called a council of her key advisors, Crannog chieftains, knights sworn to House Reed, and her father, who was recovering but still frail. They met in a torchlit chamber above Moat Caelan's gate, the wind howling outside. Meera laid out the map of the known realms. We must consider the possibility of new conflicts or alliances. The net can't remain solely defensive. We need to be proactive in protecting our interests. She traced a line from White Harbor inland. We're establishing a strong commercial route here. We should reinforce ties with Winterfell, ensure the Starks remain close allies, and keep a vigilant eye on rumors of any southern armies stirring. Her father cleared his throat. Agreed. The last war taught us that threats can come from unexpected places. We have the advantage of terrain, but if a large coalition formed against us for some reason, it could be dire. One of the knights spoke up. My lady, might we establish a small cavalry force for quick response on the edges of the marsh? Our foot soldiers are excellent in the bog, but if we need to chase raiders on firmer ground, horses could help. Meera glanced at her father. Crannogmen traditionally avoided heavy cavalry, but times were changing. She weighed the suggestion. A small force, perhaps. Light horses, used to muddy conditions. We can't rely on typical destriers. Good thinking. Another voice, a Crannog chieftain named Sten, raised a concern. We must never forget the watery ways. Don't let foreign ideas overshadow what makes us strong. Meera gave him a reassuring nod. Fear not. We'll never abandon the swampcraft, but we'll add to our strengths rather than replace them. The council continued late into the night, finalizing plans to expand their watchers' presence at key points, discussing ways to handle an influx of merchants once the new routes with White Harbor were fully operational. They also talked about forging better lines of communication with smaller northern houses, like the Glovers and the Umbers, ensuring the next role was respected. In the midst of these deliberations, a raven arrived from Winterfell. Meera excused herself to read it. A single line, bearing Bran Stark's name at the bottom. A storm begins with but a single gust of wind. Be watchful. She read it twice, trying to glean more meaning. It might be a warning of a specific threat, or just a general caution. Perhaps Bran had seen something in his visions. Either way, she returned to the council and relayed Bran's cryptic message. They concluded the meeting on a somber note, each mindful of the sense that trouble might lie ahead. In the following weeks, a subtle tension pervaded the neck. Meera found herself glancing more often at the horizon, searching for signs of turmoil. Patrols reported seeing small groups of armed men skulking near the southern edges, but none engaged in open conflict. Travelers continued to cross, paying tolls without complaint. Trade caravans from the Vale even displayed official passes, speeding their passage. On the surface, all seemed calm. Yet one night, a messenger arrived from the southern riverlands, panting and mud-spattered. He brought word that Lord Braxton Serret of the Westerlands had joined forces with a small clique of disgruntled lords and mercenary companies, possibly aiming to carve out influence in the chaos of the Stormlands. Some rumors suggested they might attempt a push north to test House Reed's defenses. Meera read the letter by torchlight in the courtyard, the flames casting flickering shadows across her face. She thought of the saboteurs who had named Serret as a backer. Perhaps this was the storm Bran alluded to, or merely the first gust of it. She summoned her captains, ordering readiness. They would not be caught unprepared. In the days that followed, Moat Caelan buzzed with activity. Sentries sharpened weapons. The blacksmith hammered out fresh arrowheads, and watchtowers stocked extra supplies. Meera considered requesting reinforcements from the Starks, but decided to wait for clearer intelligence. She did, however, dispatch scouts to the southern outskirts and wrote to White Harbor, advising them to stay alert. As winter deepened, travel became harder. Freezing rains turned parts of the swamp to slick ice, and the causeway grew treacherous. Yet House Reed's watchers adapted, wearing crampons on their boots, scattering ashes to reduce slipping. Meera oversaw everything with a relentless calm. If Serret or his allies tried anything, the neck would be ready. The cold season lingered, each day short and gray. Snow dusted the reeds in patches, though it rarely accumulated heavily in the swamp. At night, the wind howled across the wetlands, rattling the bare branches of twisted trees. Meera sometimes lay awake, listening to the eerie keening outside, wondering what future awaited House Reed. Finally, near midwinter, a raven arrived from Rickon Stark, carrying more definitive news. A group of mercenaries under Lord Seret's banner had indeed marched into the Stormlands, pillaging small villages. Several outraged local lords had formed a coalition to drive them out. There was talk that Seret might retreat northward if cornered, seeing the Neck as a route to new conquests, or at least a bargaining chip. Meera gathered her key leaders again. By torchlight, they planned for a worst-case scenario in which an entire force of Sellswords and Westerland knights might appear at the causeway's threshold. "If they come, we hold firm," she declared. "This is exactly why we built up Moat Caelan's defenses. The swamps will swallow their horses, our watchers will harass their vanguard, and if they try to besiege the fortress, the marshes will devour them." A ripple of confidence moved through the group. They had always known the Neck was a natural fortress, and now it was reinforced by cunning men and women who called it home. If Seret thought them easy prey, he would learn otherwise. As the days passed, Meera delegated tasks for watch rotation, supply lines, and quick communication with Winterfell. She didn't want to start a war, but she would not yield the causeway to any invader. By this point, House Reed's position was well known across the realm. An open attack on the Neck would be a declaration of hostility toward the north itself. Despite the tension, no enemy appeared as the long nights wore on. Word trickled in that Seret's band met heavy resistance in the Stormlands. Possibly they were forced to flee west rather than north. Meera remained vigilant, though. She had seen too many times how swiftly fortune could change. One frigid evening, she stood atop Moat Caelan's gatehouse, peering into the misty dark. A sliver of moon hung in the sky, casting faint silver light on the swamp below. The water reflected the moon like a broken mirror, shimmering in fractured patterns. The hush of night wrapped around the fortress, broken only by the occasional squelch of a watchman's foot in mud or the distant croak of a marsh frog. She remembered how, years ago, she had traveled to the wall with Bran, beyond the realm of mortal men, beyond even the rules of nature. She had faced horrors that defied imagination. Now here she was, defending a fortress from more mundane foes, ambitious lords, mercenaries, and petty conspirators. Part of her found it almost laughable that these men thought themselves fearsome, when she had survived the far greater menace of the dead. But war was war, and steel could kill just as surely as ice whites if one was careless. Her father appeared beside her, wrapped in a heavy cloak. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked softly, voice carrying in the quiet. She shook her head, eyes still on the watery expanse. "Too restless. I keep expecting to see torches of an approaching army, or the glow of a fire in the marsh." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've done all you can to prepare. The Neck is strong, and its people believe in you." She let out a slow breath, her shoulders easing slightly. "I know. Sometimes the waiting is harder than the fighting." He nodded. "True. But you've always been patient, Meera. You were patient with Jojen's visions, patient on the road with Bran, patient in all your hunts. Keep that patience now." "Nay." She allowed a half smile. "You're right." They stood together, father and daughter, the hush of the swamp enveloping them. In that moment, Meera felt the weight of her burdens lessen just enough for her to breathe freely. She thought of the path she had walked, from a girl hunting frogs in the Neck to a lady defending it as a great house. She thought of the future, uncertain yet open, shaped by her choices and the cunning of her people. When dawn approached, she was still there, her father having retired to rest. A soft light bled into the sky, illuminating the drifting mists. She heard the shift change in the courtyard, the quiet shuffle of new guards taking their posts. The Neck was never truly silent, never truly still, but there was a certain comforting rhythm to it, like a living thing breathing. She descended from the gatehouse as the sky brightened to a pale gray. She heard a scout calling her name from the courtyard. Her pace quickened. The scout hurried over, breathing hard from exertion, face flushed with cold. "My lady, riders approaching from the south. They bear no banners. Could be Seret's men or bandits or something else. They're still some leagues away, but we spotted them on a ridge." Meera's heart kicked up. "How many?" "Hard to say in the dim light. At least 24, maybe more." She nodded. "Sound the alert. Move watchers to vantage points. Prepare for parley, but be ready to fight if needed." Thus the day began, with a potential threat on the horizon. Meera felt the old fire in her veins, the hunter's focus that had guided her through so many perils. She readied her spear, summoned her knights, and made for the walls. If this was the confrontation they had dreaded, so be it. The Neck would hold. House Reed would endure. And she, Meera Reed, who had once guarded a boy with visions beyond the wall, would guard her home now, with every ounce of cunning and courage she possessed. As she stood on the ramparts watching that distant ridge where shapes moved in the gloom, she recalled Jojen's last words, spoken long ago. "The wolf needs you. The world needs you." Now the North needed her, and so did the Neck, and she would not fail them. The riders drew closer, silhouettes cresting the horizon. Meera's grip on her spear tightened. The morning mist parted, revealing them more clearly. In that tense moment, the harsh lessons of war arose in her memory. But she forced herself to breathe, to remain steady. The causeway stretched ahead, leading them toward Moat Cailin. In the stillness, she could almost hear the faint clink of bridles and the squelch of hooves on damp ground. Whether they came in peace or for battle, they would find the guardians of the Neck unafraid. And so, with the swirling mist at her back and the fortress at her feet, Meera Reed stood firm, ready to face whatever challenge the rising day would bring. She was no longer just a girl with a net. She was a leader, a protector, and in her heart, she held the quiet, unbreakable resolve of the Crannogmen. The story of House Reed continued, each twist of fate forging a new chapter in the shifting, untamed land they called home.